So, from what I understand, you are born and raised in Texas. Is that fair to say? Okay, so out in the Dallas area, I'm not sure if I recall what I came across as far
Okay,
as where
so yeah, I was born in Fort Worth. I
okay,
grew up, elementary school in San Antonio, Texas, up until about middle school. And then my
okay.
high school, I spent 2 years in North Carolina, Goldsboro, North Carolina.
Oh, I know where that's at.
And my last 2 years of high school was in Wichita Falls, Texas,
Okay, so you're a Southern boy through and through, pretty much.
pretty much.
Okay, and
Texas.
right, right. Well, so in North Carolina though, because that's where I'm at right now. I'm outside of just of Charlotte here. So the 2 years that you were here, obviously you moved back to Texas. Was your experience here in North Carolina just as good, or I mean, what was the experience for you?
No, it was bad.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
My dad was Air Force,
Okay.
military. So we went from Randolph Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. And
Okay.
my family had been living on base for, gosh, forever. I mean, it seemed like more than 20 years that my family, which is kind of unusual for any family to stay on a military base in one location. Usually they're
Bouncing
TDY
around.
all
Yeah.
different other bases. But we grew up several generations in the same grade school, same high school. And then when it came to me, just before my freshman year, my dad took a TDY. Me and my younger brother and my mom, we moved to Goldsboro, North Carolina. I think it's
Mhm.
Seymour Johnson Air Force Base
Yeah, I think so.
that's
Yeah.
up there. Now, mind you, I came from San Antonio, Texas, Randolph Air Force Base, which is this international hub for pilot training, in
Right.
jet. They have all these, and it's San Antonio, it's huge, millions of people. And I go to Goldsboro, North Carolina, and there's like
10
maybe
people.
50,000
Yeah.
people,
Yeah, yeah.
and it,
Yeah.
it really was like 50 years behind in the times.
Yeah.
And I've never seen, a community that was so split racially.
Yeah.
I mean, there were blacks, there were Asians, and then there were whites. And then there was me, Hispanic,
Hmm.
but I didn't look like the Hispanic people that that lived in Goldsboro. And they
Yeah.
didn't go to the school, they just worked in the fields because
Right.
it's like a big tobacco farming community of
Yeah, I
some sort.
remember hearing that. Yeah.
And I mean, it was such a big thing that they would delay school if the tobacco harvest went late because a lot of the students worked in the fields. And it was that small, it was that backwards, and then it was scary because from San Antonio, I had like long black, jet black hair, came down to my waist. I wore denim trench coats with Ralph Lauren button polo shirts. I
Yeah.
had like the denim acid wash jeans tucked inside my capa, and dude, I looked like a bad MTV music video, and I just got dropped in the 1950s like Happy Days of some sort, dude. And it was a nightmare. It was a
I
nightmare.
love that analogy.
And I mean, the town, I mean, it seemed like everybody there had, a third degree black belt.
Mhm.
Everybody. I mean, everybody. And come to find out at, one of the gyms or something like that, I can't remember, it was like the Y or something like that. They had this guy who was a local and had a lot of family, friends, and things like that. And he was, I guess, like a fifth degree. He was on the U.S. Olympic team and he was like a
Oh, I see
fourth,
what you're
fifth
saying.
degree black belt. And
Yeah.
so there were a lot of people that, there was nothing else to do. There was football,
Hmm.
sex, and jujitsu and karate. And so, I when I got there, I kind of think I know for a fact I attracted a lot of attention. And it was a small country, backward ass country town, my sorry, no offense.
No.
But and then I showed up and then it was like every guy just wanted to kill me and every girl wanted to meet me. And both of them were like they were dating like high school, quarterback,
Yeah.
cheerleader, prom queen kind of like things. And
Mhm.
then when I showed up, it was like sort of stirred the pot. And I really did, in a lot of aspects, I really did fear for my life.
Was it
And
the
it just so
entire
happened,
time you were there?
oh yeah,
Really, that bad?
There was a lot of racial tension in that town.
Right, right. That part I
And
get.
I didn't my color skin isn't like true like
Hispanic.
Tex-Mex brown,
Yeah,
Hispanic brown. It's a
yeah,
olive colored skin, so they categorize me as Italian, unless they asked me.
yeah.
And so I was like, I was one of three Hispanics in the whole town
Really?
in the school,
Oh,
but in
okay,
the
okay, okay.
town there were more Mexicans that worked in the fields and stuff. None of them went to the school.
Interesting.
So
So,
I spent 2 years there, and I just couldn't get out of there fast enough.
but so once you left, you said where did you go back again in Texas? That you guys had
Wichita Falls, Texas.
so going back into Texas for you was I would imagine was a huge relief. Is that right?
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes. It
but
was like coming back to society, the world.
well, I mean, but let me ask you this here then. When you were there the 2 years in Goldsboro, I meant to say, I mean, was there? I mean, was there anything a positive you took away from that experience that you still carry with you to this day that may have had an impact apart from the racial tension that you were dealing with there, but anything else outside of that could have like made it some sort of made a change of perception about how you may have looked at things, considering how where you grew up, where you were staying at, and then going back.
Yes, that 99% of the time, no matter where you go, people are almost always the same.
Right.
There are different layers and levels, different timelines. I say that they were like 50 years behind the times.
Mm.
Now they may be up into the 90s, maybe early 2000s,
Right.
so it's like every little community and society moves at their own rate, their own progression.
Right.
And for an outsider, it's very beneficial to be able to not only adapt uh, to those circumstances, but to also, once you're inside, once you've infiltrated, to try to make a little bit of noise, a
Hmm.
little bit of difference, a little bit of you're not going to forget me kind of like mentality. If there's
Mm.
anybody in this small town that you're going to remember, it's going to be me. So it kind of gave me like I knew when I went there that I was going to be making movies. I knew that's what I wanted to do, that I was going to end up doing with my life. But I wanted people to know who I was before I started that when I was there. I don't know why. I just felt like,
You don't know what was a catalyst to give you that thought process?
yeah, to give me that sort of mentality
Yeah.
that not only do I stand out here in this small little community,
Right.
but I can take that mentality and apply it anywhere where there's millions of people. And as long
Mm.
as my work ethic is still the same, my beliefs and moral compass are still the same, I can progress that into any society, any market, any population. Um, and that's what I've come to find out is that at the core, people are really all basically the same.
Yeah.
And thank God I went into the movie industry because I think a lot of people are very much the same when it comes to movies. What
Right.
they like to see, what they like to experience, what moves them, what excites them. What horror movies are great, what dramas are great,
Yeah.
and I think in that mentality, I learned that people all around are, when it comes to movies, are really all basically the same. And
Yeah.
now with social media, it's like you've just closed the gap, with 8 billion other people, on this planet. So I think that was probably the best thing that I got out of that move to North Carolina at a young age. And then when I came back to Texas, I was like, now it's time to
Move forward.
yeah, move forward so
Yeah.
that in later in life, those people that I grew up with in high school see me later, on TV, or know that my movies are out in theaters, or on Amazon or Hulu, Prime,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
I don't. It sounds like it's a fame kind of like thing, but
Right.
for North Carolina, that's the only thing I had to go with was I want to make sure that these people remember me so that later in life they'll say, "Hey, I knew that guy when he was up here in North Carolina."
So let me ask you this here then. When you were in North Carolina, you mentioned about your fear of your life virtually the entire time there. So the racial tension that you had experienced firsthand, was that? I mean, did you experience that before while in Texas? Because you mentioned about your background where you were pretty much, you wore whatever was the fashion at the time, and it seemed like no one was judgmental because that was the norm out there. But going over to Goldsboro, kind of shaking up the system, if you will, where you are bringing your culture from Texas, at least from where you're from, bring it over to that part of the country where it wasn't accepted. But did you ever experience anything of to that, at least close to that, or got a preview of that back at home? Like, did you ever experience anything like that at all, to that extent,
Okay,
or somewhat close to
you
that?
you nailed it. You nailed it by saying culture. It was definitely culture shock
Right.
going, and me having to adapt to that to where I'm accepted and I don't have to fear walking, the streets at night.
Hmm.
Um, by the time I left, I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of friends, and I wish I could have kept all those connections because they had just started to, I guess, open up to me.
Right.
So that was the culture shock for me going there. Coming back to Texas, I've never had any problem with culture shock because there's such a variety of culture here in
Right.
Texas, that there's nothing shocking about it.
But you never experienced racism growing up in Texas, have you?
I did on in
But
San
never to the extent as
Antonio.
Goldsboro when you were there.
I think, okay, so like I was saying, that it's a progression,
Right.
at different times. When I was back in Texas, I was younger. I was in like grade school, middle school on an Air Force base. And so, there were some white guys, I was, fourth, fifth grade.
Hmm.
And there was always a little bit of racial tension because there was like
Right.
the white guys would always fight the Chinese guys before school. Every morning it was like go out to the playground. Then there
Oh,
were
okay. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
black guys that would always fight the Mexicans.
Yeah.
And it was just little stuff like that, racial tension.
Right.
Uh, then you go to Goldsboro, North Carolina. That was the most extreme that I've ever experienced. Coming back to Texas, which was high school, some college, and now the prime of my life, I've never had um, any racial tension whatsoever.
So, growing up in Texas, for you, and I'm curious because and that I'm always curious about how, because myself being Hispanic, but my Hispanic background are, I'm essentially a first generation myself. My siblings were all first generation here in this country. So we still, in the area that I grew up in Northern Virginia, because that's where I'm originally from. I'm from Northern Virginia, and it's a melting pot of different cultures. Just we're in the metropolitan area of DC, Southern Maryland.
Yeah.
So we have cultures from all parts of the world, and even here in the United States too, where you have Boston, New Jersey, New York. Everyone's just kind of trickling in that one little area. So I got to see a bit of, I wouldn't say of everything, but just enough to understand how big the world really is. But for me, when I was growing up, speaking, being coming from an Hispanic home, it was normal for me to come across friends who all spoke Spanish because that's how they were raised at home. I met somebody a while ago from Texas, and I've heard of these stories, but I actually never really met someone like that because, again, I was always accustomed to where I grew up. But when I started talking to them about their background, I said, "Oh, so what part of Texas?" I think they said, I think they might have said, I think they might have said El Paso. I can't remember. But when I asked him, "So do you speak Spanish?" Just out of curiosity, he was like, "No," and I was like, "So how come?" My parents never taught me to speak it. And then that's when he started educating me about the how things were different back then for his family, where they first got into the country, the racial tensions that occurred, and there was a little bit of history that I've heard about, but getting in that firsthand um, encounter, what he had experienced, that was something that I was not really familiar with at all. And he was like, "Yeah, but California is just the same as well too, just depending what part of California you're growing up in." Because I have friends from California as well too that have the same exact background as myself. So for me, I'm curious about with you, was it like that as well too? Where did you have, being Hispanic, was that part of your everyday culture or everyday routine as far as, having that? I'm not sure what Hispanic background you're, if you're Mexican or.
Yeah. So, I mean, my parents are both Mexican. They both grew up in San Antonio, the
Okay.
Galveston area, Wichita Falls. And they spoke a lot of Spanish
Okay.
every day in the house. They spoke it frequently. We would go visit, grandma and the uncles, and they all spoke Spanish.
Right.
Um, I took Spanish in high school,
Yeah.
things like that. But I lived on a military base, and so it really wasn't required to speak Spanish. Now, if
Right.
I lived off base more in the Spanish communities, probably I would have picked it up a lot more.
Right.
And it
Right.
probably would have stuck with me. And right now, I mean, even up to this day, one of the most ongoing jokes on almost any set with me is that, especially when there are Hispanic producers and directors, is that I don't speak Spanish. And
Right.
so, while they're all speaking Spanish, I'll take photos, and post them on social media, making, jokes about, I wish I could understand what they're saying, but I don't, I don't speak Spanish, and I was working on a a web TV series called, oh, geez, it's called the Realty, the Realty,
Realty
the real,
sounds familiar. I'm not sure if I can recall
so,
where I've heard that from.
So it's about this Hispanic community of realtors, and they're selling homes, and they do it both they do every episode in English and
In
Spanish.
Spanish, right?
Yeah, and so
Oh,
the
I think
whole
I'm
cast and everybody is all Spanish. They all speak it. They're going through lines and dialogue through all these scenes in Spanish, and I'm the only one there that doesn't understand any of it. And
right.
I was one of the cameramen on the first season. I hope to be the cinematographer, the DP on the second season,
Okay.
because they're a bunch of great guys to work with, and the show is absolutely funny. But
And where's this available on the reality show you're talking about?
let me look it up. I'll look it up while we're talking real quick.
Okay, well, so going kind of getting back to the topic here. So so basically you don't speak Spanish, and but here's the thing. And the reason I'm bringing this up here is because I was actually curious about your background here too, considering your last name. And I'm always curious to hear someone's perspective growing up here in the States, having an Hispanic background, but to see what that was like for them personally. I mean, it's not something that I'm always I'm not the type of person that's really going to be interested in, like, tell me, was it rough for you? I just am curious to hear what the experience was like, because I've been isolated where I've grown up, where the culture was so common for me to be around that all the time. Even to this day, my mother lives like two houses down from me. When I go over to visit her, it's all in Spanish. So that has never left. Um, Not to say my Spanish is the greatest, but I can still carry a conversation. If I live in a country long enough, I'll be able to be fluent within months. But the point I'm getting at is that I'm always curious to hear how someone's life was like growing up, where if you've never have dealt with maybe the racial tension in certain areas when it comes to your skin color, but the prejudice within the community, which is something that I have personally experienced. I'm always curious to hear what someone else's perspective on some other parts of the country, like if that's something that was, if something you had experienced as well too, and if you did, how did you go about handling that?
Oh, wow. Honestly, I can't think of any situation. Yeah, I guess I've never really faced it. I mean, as a
Okay.
kid, I mean, those are kids just blurting out,
Yeah.
slurs because, they heard it in the movies, or, the older brothers and sisters, but I don't think anybody that I've ever met or been associated with um, has really ever exposed me to that severity of racism.
But not even like as far as like the prejudice that comes within the community. So like, for example, like from my experience, I've had, won't say what country it is, but if I've had people that I've conversed with, and my family's Nicaraguan. So one of the things that I've learned as I grew up, that apparently Central American men are bossy people, which I know I'm not. I mean, I can be demanding, but I'm not bossy. But there has been those type of prejudice that are in place, and then vice versa from people from my family's background too, that have the same perception of other people from other countries too. And the funny thing about that for me is that you throw a bottle of alcohol in there, they're your best friends. And then all the things that they had said about Mexicans are like this or Peruvians are like that, they forget that conversation 15 minutes that they had 15 minutes ago, and all of a sudden they're good friends. So like
Yeah.
to me, it was all bullshit to me when I when I realized that what was the whole point of this whole importance of like the culture and saying these things, and then I mean, it was something that I had grown up with that I absolutely hated within that community. And then once I started to converse with other people outside of my culture, I realized, oh, okay, it's not just exclusive to as far as that mindset within my community. It was also a thing that I've seen in Asian cultures, African American culture, other cultures as well too, where they still carry that same mindset. So it's not just a race thing; it's literally a culture thing. So I'm like I said before, I was just bringing it up because I was very curious to see how that experience was like for you, and if you had, like I said, I don't want to repeat the question again, but I think you understand where I was trying to come from with that. So, but considering that you've never actually had to deal with that, though, from what I understand, I think that's great. You never had to go through that, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it was never, I mean, as you know, as far as I can remember, the most that it ever got was like maybe in high school.
Right.
I had, oh, okay, so I had a good friend in high school. We were probably seniors at the time, and great best friends, still to this day, he's my best friend. And we went to his house, and he's a white guy.
Yeah.
And of course, his dad's there, typical white guy, alcoholic. Um, Guy was just a miserable ass, and he told his son, he goes, um, "You tell your friend Tony, you like get out of the house or something, like don't ever bring him back in the house." And he asked him, he goes, "Well, can I ask why?" And he goes, "Because he's Mexican." And so that was the worst thing that I've ever experienced. Was my best friend in high school. I couldn't go to his house because his dad was a racist pig and didn't want me in his home because I was Mexican. That was the worst that it ever got.
Okay.
Before that in grade school, there was a guy, typical white guy, kind of looked like a surfer, just jerk dick, and he chased me one day after a baseball game, with a chain saying, "Orale, orale, Mexican," chasing me like
Yeah.
I was a fucking slave. That was, but aside from that, everything that I ever faced racially with people that didn't like me at first, or I didn't like on a first meeting, a first impression,
Right.
just like you said, I mean, it was only a matter of time before you realize it was just a bullshit front, and that
Yeah.
you realize people are really the same wherever you go,
Yeah.
and then when you open up that mindset, then you sort of forget about skin color.
Yeah.
And so thank God I've never experienced, being chased down in the middle of the night, by fucking, the KKK or
Yeah.
some other racist group who didn't like my skin color or eye color or whatever. Um, or that I ever lived in a neighborhood that was that bad, or had gang related ties. None of that stuff that ever dealt with race.
Yeah.
And I mean, I talk about being in Goldsboro,
yeah.
that racial tension there was just because that was it. Those are the only three races you had in school, and every group kept to themselves. And I didn't have a group, so I kind of like had to learn to float around, and each class was like, I'm going to make as many diverse friends as possible. I mean, that was me anyway.
Hmm.
And then, I go to my next class and I got to make as many diverse friends as possible because when it comes to lunchtime or after school or before school, I don't want to be caught with not having good friends watching my back against people who don't know me. And
Yeah.
so, it took nearly 2 years, but finally I was like really probably one of the most liked guys on campus before I had to leave. So I didn't get to make any really bonds while I was there. I had two friends. I had an Italian friend. I think her name was Nikki, and a
Shout out
black
to Mickey.
female named Roxanne. And they were both just as flamboyant as I was. They looked like MTV bad music videos from the 80s, with the punked up hair, bright
Yeah.
colors. And so we were like the only three people in the whole school that actually put on a show with our wardrobe.
With her, yeah.
Yeah, so I made the right friends as quick as possible.
Interesting. So, what was the name of that reality show that you were said you were working?
The
I'm sorry. I'm
Realty
sorry. I meant to
TV,
say, where was it going to be airing there? I meant to ask.
it's on YouTube, and
Oh,
it's
it's on
called the
YouTube. Okay.
Realty. Yeah, the Realty TV,
Realty TV. Okay.
and
It
there's
sounds familiar. think. But
Yeah, so they had their season last year, and it was really good. Great response.
okay,
Um, they've been pushing it at a lot of festivals, and
okay,
it's been doing really well. I mean, I can't think of any other web series show that actually deals in the bilingual language. Both in English to that market and to the Spanish market speaking. And when you talk about, real estate, when you're buying real estate in Texas, I mean, it's good to know both languages.
yeah,
And so I think that and the producer, he's one of them's a realtor himself, a top-notch realtor, and he's the executive producer, one of the lead actors, also in the show. One of the other producers is he does home construction of like really nice homes.
hmm,
So they're all into the real estate business in one aspect or another. So it's kind of like based on a lot of reality and truth when it comes to trying to make a sale to people who don't speak English or to people who speak Spanish and
yeah.
trying to buy land in Texas. So it turns out to be a really good foundation for a comedy. And
So you talked about how you're hoping to be the DP on the second season. So for a reality show, how do you guys coordinate that when it comes to DPing for a reality show? Because I understand there's obviously a certain look that each show has, but for me, I just don't really understand how you set that up for reality TV. Like how do you guys work that out? Because I would imagine that there's something you guys have to plan. From what I understand, how reality TV show works, there's certain things that are kind of planned out. Other things are kind of almost on the spot. So is everything prepared ahead of time, or you just kind of wing it and then figure it out along the way as
okay,
things progress?
yeah, so I'm sorry, I say that incorrectly. It's a web series
Oh,
called
okay.
Reality. It's not a reality show.
Oh, I
It's a
got you.
web
Okay.
series, so it's scripted.
Oh, okay, 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 okay. I got
Um,
you.
and it's the first season we did two cameras. So I think for the second season they want to keep that momentum going. They just want to improve the quality of on the lighting, the camera equipment,
Gotcha.
things like that, and
Okay.
just I mean everybody's first season is how quick and efficiently, how fast can you shoot it,
Yeah.
and with as little money as possible. So, we had
Yeah.
some little Sony A7s or something like that the first year, and
Mm.
they would overheat after like they kept overheating.
Really?
Uh, so now, when you think about the second season, there's so many options you can go with. The Black Magics, you can get two or three camera operators in there, and that's what why I'm hoping to get the DP job is because I want to get into multicam shooting as a director of photography and
Uh,
also as a director, because I just directed my first feature film. I've co-directed a lot of stuff, but
right.
now that I'm directing, there's times where I think this would be great with two camera or three camera setup. And, now, camera gear is getting so inexpensive. I'm looking at possibly having three cameras by the middle of next year. And then after that, it's just finding another camera operator, cinematographer that connects visually with each project because they're not all shot the same. And like you said,
Right.
um, a web series is, a comedy web series is shot totally different. It's like looking at The Office and then you go and you do a movie
Yeah.
that's supposed to look like Dune or that's supposed to look like, Star Wars or
Right.
whatever, you
Right.
know, post-apocalyptic action flicks or whatever.
So now that because you've done co-directing as you mentioned before, and you just directed your first feature film, what do you prefer, cinematography or directing? Like, what's your preference?
Actually, both.
Okay.
And I'll explain why. Because when I first started, I was doing a lot of directing, co-directing,
Mm,
and it was a lot of young filmmakers when I first moved to Dallas, like 12 years ago. And I was trying to make a name for myself because after Goldsboro, North Carolina, I moved to Wichita Falls, Texas. And after I graduated, I started working for CBS and NBC in news as a
mm,
photojournalist. And that was my education and training on shooting, editing, using natural light and trying to make news look more interesting than what it is. So every day I had to put out a 2-minute documentary On weekends, I was putting out 8 or 9 short stories that were anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute and a half long. So it taught me workflow. It taught me how to be efficient in shooting. Then I got out of news and I moved to Dallas.
How
And
long
I
were you
was
in the
like,
news for, like working in that environment?
it was like 7 years,
Oh,
maybe.
okay.
It's not 5, 6 years, 7 years almost.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I loved it. I was an ambulance chaser. I was, dude, crime scenes, shootings, car chases, structure fires. I loved it, dude. I was a junkie for the adrenaline. And
Really?
but it was also an opportunity to learn how to shoot something different every single day. And you only get one opportunity to shoot it. You can't reenact a police arrest or a raid or a car accident. You have to be ready 24/7.
Right.
Then after I got out of news, I moved to Dallas, which was like 11, 12 years ago. And I was like, I had a Panasonic HVX 200 with some 35 millimeter lenses, Zeiss lenses,
Right.
and an Alienware laptop and a small audio log thing. That's all I had. That was my whole movie studio. So I started on Facebook and I started meeting all these film people who were also first time filmmakers.
Mm.
And they were all starting off on short. And of course, nobody had budgets. And it was like, well, we have, a couple $100 for the whole weekend, 3 day shoot. It was like, perfect, I'll take it. But I'm the DP, I'm your cinematographer, and I'm also going to be in your post production supervisor, which means I'm going to help with the editing. I'm going to do help with the music, the score, the coloring. I wanted to make sure that everything that I was shooting, I was in some way controlling the outcome.
So were you having like final edit with the cut of the film that you were working on?
Yeah, I edited most of everything that I did. All the
Okay.
short films that I ever worked on, I probably did like 90% of them. There were
Okay.
a couple of short films that I did for other people that, they had their own editors or did it themselves, but 80, 90% of the short films that I produced, I also edited. And that was just because I had seen I held a film festival in Wichita Falls before I became a filmmaker. I held a film festival and I had like it was a great international film festival. We had over, God, I can't remember how many movies submissions we had, but we had 5 locations over a 4 day period that we were showing movies all around town. We had 150 people show up dressed as zombies to do a zombie run from one side of downtown to the other.
Right.
And but more than anything, I got to meet a lot of independent filmmakers and I got to see a lot of short films. And at the time I was shooting news and I was like, a lot of this stuff, like 75% of it just looked like trash. And I was like, I could shoot this so much better. Why am I holding on to a news job, which is almost a dead end job, and not pursue the film career right now as good as I am at running camera? I could go on, start doing short films, shoot 100 times better than all of these, more than half of these people. But then I could also learn the movie industry because at the time, Wichita Falls is university didn't have a film. Uh,
Studio or
they
community at that
had
point.
like radio and television, but it
Right.
was very lame. And it was very lame. I mean, people would come out of there with their 4 year degree and never held a camera, never edited, never did anything. And I was like, I don't want to do that.
Mm.
I wanted to be on a set learning hands on. So I went straight to shooting news as a camera jockey. And, I think it was probably the best thing I ever did.
But you said it's a dead end job. Though. What about it was dead end for you to say that as for you to work in that field?
I would never be anything more than a photojournalist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I mean, I could go work for the bigger stations, but it would be the same thing.
Just more responsibilities.
You're only as good as your last story. And I think what I considered the height of photojournalism was being a combat photojournalist. And I was like, at the time, I really wanted to go overseas. It was just the beginning of, the war in the Middle East. And I was like, how do I get unionized as a photojournalist so I can go over there and shoot combat footage. I mean, that's really what I wanted. I thought that was the height of it.
Mm,
And, in a way it was. Otherwise, you're just at a TV station, no matter where you are in the country, doing the
watching
same
traffic.
thing. Yeah, in traffic, on a
Yeah,
hustle, trying to get a story, a soundbite back to the station
yeah.
on before 5 and 6 o'clock. And it's just,
I see what you're
after
saying.
7
Okay.
years, I was out. I wanted to make movies, but I knew
Gotcha.
that was my foundation in education.
So let me ask you something real quickly about the background that you had with editing and shooting shooting real life. Um, here's the thing that kind of piqued my interest. I'm not sure because I don't know how much insight you can share with your current film that you just shot here, but um, considering that you were having to catch live, you know, exciting moments, if you will, where you have to have some sort of action to kind of appeal to for the reel that you want the news station would want to show to the audience. Did you ever learn something about how you may perceive on how you want to shoot certain things? Like, I like the way this turned out. Therefore, if I'm going to shoot a movie, I know that I'm going to be looking for this, excuse me, looking for this, looking for that. So that way it paces well, and that the action, it has impact every single time. There's going to be a punch thrown, or someone's going to be jumping off a building, or whatever the case may be. So something to, did you experience something that you looked at that made you appreciate, or that made you approach directing, or in some cases even I would say cinematography too, that made you want to capture the impact that certain sequences may have that you felt like were lacking in some of the things you had seen before with some of the short films, or other reels that you may have come across? Like, I know it's a long question, but I'm hoping you understand where I was coming from with that.
Yeah. I got in trouble a lot too shooting
Okay.
news because I was shooting it more like a movie.
I'm
And so I
trying to get
would
the
shoot,
teardrop to
I
come
was
down. Yeah.
shooting action sequences, I
Okay.
was doing like, and then if it was an emotional piece, um, me and the reporter that I was working with on the news piece, our goal was basically as soon as our piece aired on the news, we were watching the phones and emails to see how many people would call in saying, "Oh my God, I can't stop crying," or "Oh my God, I
Mm,
can't stop
yeah.
laughing," or "Oh my God, that was so awesome." So I kind of like that was my adrenaline drug, was getting the responses viewers of not typical news. I mean, typical news is, oh, here's a static shot of the building, here's a
Hmm.
tight shot of the guy, your talking
Yeah.
head, here's some B-roll shot of him walking through the office.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, this is the only education that I'm going to get to learn how to shoot and use natural light. So I'm going to make this as emotionally impactful as possible. And after 1 year of shooting, I ended up being the chief photographer. Okay, so CBS, I was just a studio camera jockey.
Okay.
Worked my way up, got into directing. Then I went into the newsroom and I was editing, but it was all linear editing. I mean, it was like deck to deck editing. It was so antiquated, analog. And
Okay.
but it was a good foundation for building layers. Um, and then later we went to the digital age, and so that was where I was like, I found a home. But while I was working with CBS, I started shooting and editing, and I got to be really good at it because I found every shooting, structure fire, car accident. I was making small 2-minute movies. And the other station, the NBC station, kind of picked up on that because I was beating them to a lot of stories, getting all the great interviews and leaving sometimes before they even got to the location. And then we get back and we're already showing footage and they're not even back to the station yet. So it became a lot of
Interesting.
competition. And then NBC finally asked me to come shoot for them. And they were getting all new P2 cameras. They were getting all new Avid editor editing bays. And, it was a $3 an hour raise with better benefits. And I was like, I'm taking it. And then once I learned the digital realm, I was like, there's so much latitude in using natural light that I took that as my kind of like my go-to. And
I'm curious though about what you said about using digital, where you felt like you felt more at home with the how the camera was able to capture light without having to, because I know when it comes to shooting on film, some nowadays certain people have a problem with that because they like the efficiency that shooting digital offers, whereas there are some old school guys, Quentin Tarantino is an example, or Christopher Nolan. They're adamant about film is the way to go. But
Oh,
for
I'm sure.
you, are you kind of like in the same boat as them, or are you kind of open up to the ideas, whatever's best for the project?
Both. I love digital.
Okay,
It's just such an evolving technology. You can't do anything without it. Now,
right.
when it comes to shooting film, yeah, I love shooting film, and I've done it 3 times,
Okay.
and it was all Super 16, and I loved every bit of it. And in a way, it was easier, but at the same time, it was a little bit more It was simpler because all you have is film stock, your
Mm,
camera, your lens, and a light meter if you know how to use it. And then, of course, you have your lights and stuff. But in the digital, you don't need all of that stuff because you got a monitor right there that shows you everything that you need to know, all your histograms and things like that to know about your exposure. Next year, I'm still shooting a 16 millimeter short film next year, and I can't wait. Um, I love shooting Super 16. I think if I owned a camera, my ex girlfriend bought a Super 16 uh, film camera, Arri Super 16 film camera, just
mm,
to shoot a short film called Willow, and it was a film that takes place in the late 60s, 70s,
hmm.
and we didn't want to shoot it digitally because we wanted it to look like a movie that was shot at that time period. And we
Right.
could use digital effects and things like that, but we also wanted to push ourselves into actually shooting a medium that might not be around, for too long. And so it was cheaper to buy a film camera than it was to rent it. So she bought a film camera. We bought some film stock and we shot this amazing short film. And I love it. I'll send you the link to it and you can watch it. It's a great little short film.
I would love to watch it.
It's beautiful, but you do have to, for film, you do have to understand that light meter and exposure.
Okay.
You have to. And then you have to, like, that film camera, you have to do some upgrading to accommodate, a video monitor or something like that, so you can do framing, not just looking through your eyepiece. And I love
Mm,
looking through an eyepiece when I shoot. I don't get to do that enough, but on occasion, because most of the time I'm a Steadicam operator. But
okay.
if I get to be on a Dana Dolly as an operator or a DVP or sticks or something like that, I like the idea. I like the feeling I get looking through an eyepiece. And
Interesting.
it's yeah. So on a film camera, that's what I was doing a lot of, was looking through that eyepiece, and it felt more realistic to me.
Because of the
I don't know
texture
how
that
to
it that it
explain
that it
that.
that it provides. Is that what you mean by that?
Well, because you're shooting an image that's just being burned onto something that can't be changed unless you open the canister and expose it to sunlight before developing.
That's
I
a
mean, but
cardinal sin right there.
once it's developed, we transferred it digitally, and then
Mm,
we still had a lot of latitude in color grading. So I mean, you
yeah.
still get the best of both worlds.
Are you one of those guys that that really cares to point out, okay, that's digital, that's film? Like, are you one of those people that kind of looks at that to kind of see if you're able to pick up on that? Because as you mentioned before, and I think a lot of people may not realize it, I mean, I'm not sure if most people care, but I think it's important to take note of that um you can shoot something and then filter it out to give it a certain look, give it a certain aesthetic. And in some ways I always figured that it's kind of hard to tell how the films are shot as far as like the type of cameras they're going to be using, because one movie for me is example where they use I think three different type of cameras, and I can't remember what types they were because I'm not familiar with that. But it's that movie Steve Jobs with Michael Fassbender, which was directed by Danny Boyle. The film has three different time periods as far as like I think the 80s, no, 70s, 80s, 90s, I think is what it was, or not 80s, 90s, 2000s, something like that. But Danny Boyle had used three different type of cameras to fit the time that how film would have been shot during that decade. I honestly couldn't tell the difference. I mean, I could see the framing, of course, but I just couldn't tell as far as the look of the film is concerned because I don't really have a good eye for that. But there are some people out there who do take notice of that, and I'm always curious for someone that such yourself who's worked with both digital and film. Do you feel like you have a good eye to kind of pick that apart, notice that okay, that's film, that's digital. I can see that was filtered out. It was done on this digital platform, whatever the case may be. Do you have a good eye for that sort of stuff?
I I I think I do. I
Okay.
mean, I can tell that there's a lot of movies that are naturally shot on film, and I know most of a lot of older movies, of course, are obviously all shot
Right.
on film. I get a lot of those movies, and they still hold up to this day, image
Yeah.
wise, super beautiful, you know. And then once they're remastered, it's like this is great, and you can
Yeah.
even tell the difference in a movie shot 35 millimeter film that's been remastered digitally as opposed to a film that's just shot digitally. You can still see the difference. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, I do look for a lot of that stuff because there's, you know, like you say, there are filmmakers that still a lot of filmmakers that still shoot on film.
right.
There's a lot of high end commercials that are still being shot on film. Um, Dune shot digitally, transferred to film, transferred back, just to give it a medium of film digital look. And I think for that movie, I think it worked out beautifully. I think the process that they did for Dune is, I thought was very clever. I
Interesting.
think when you have like Quentin Tarantino who shoots nothing but film,
Yeah.
I mean, it's to me, I understand how dangerous it can be shooting
Yeah.
on film.
Yeah.
Like we actually we rolled out on film and didn't know. We shot an entire in the movie in that short film Willow. We did an entire dance party, furrier dance party.
Okay.
We did this whole furrier party, shot the whole thing, and then we were like, "Hey, how much film do we have left?" And it was my first time, so I didn't listen for the film to click
Mm,
out.
for the real,
I
yeah.
didn't I
Yeah.
didn't pay enough attention to the meter on the outside saying this is how many feet of film you have. We didn't have a first AC, you know, clocking time saying, well, we probably got this many feet left of film. You know, I didn't pay attention to the readout on the film on
Mm,
the Arri camera
yeah.
itself. You know, I was just so excited shooting film, and that's the difference between film and digital. Is digital, you shoot till your media runs out, and you're still
Right.
okay. If you
Yeah.
run out of film and you don't know it, you just blew that entire scene, and you're not going to know it until the next day when you're looking through dailies,
Yeah.
or a month later when you get the film back and you're saying, "Where's that scene?" Luckily, they asked the question. He goes, "How much film do we have?" And we kind of stopped and we started listening for the film and go, "Well, it sounds different." And then we, you know, after further after further inspection, we realized we had shot an entire scene with no film. So we
Oh.
had to go back 2 weeks later and reshoot the scene. And then, of course, we didn't have Super 16 Kodak film. We had to shoot some of it on 8 millimeter. So mixing the
Mm,
mediums, yeah, we did. In Willow, you'll see it. The outdoor scenes with Willow in the bunny suit are shot on 8 millimeter, and it's all grainy. And when she's at the furrier party, it's super grainy. When she's without it telling the story and everything, it's all
right.
super 16 and it looks beautiful. And you can just see the difference. But we use the 8 millimeter for some exterior scenes and some transitional scenes. So it all worked out, you know, and it gave it a totally different look. And so now I understand that desire to want to mix Super 16 with 35 with something in 4K, 6K, 8K,
Interesting.
and see how you can blend all that together. Another movie I did, I was the Steadicam operator for, called The Tasmanian Devil, and the DP on that was so smart, very talented guy, and he would they shot some flashback scenes, which was apparently like in the 60s, 70s on Super 16. And
Mm,
then the modern storytelling was all done with an Arri Alexa, you know. So and when they mixed it on the final cut, it looks, you can see the difference. You can
okay.
feel a difference. I can see the difference and tell the difference. And I think it looks beautiful. And I think it's really smart. There's just
So
some things you can't reproduce, and a visual image from pre-digital is something you really can't fake.
So when you're so whenever you're in this case when you before you shot your film that you were kind of touching upon earlier, did you already have it in your mind about how you wanted to go about shooting the film, or it was a situation where I want to shoot it like this, but I can't get the equipment, so by default I'm going to be using this, and then I'm going to have an idea about how I want to change the aesthetics to give the film the look that I want it to have? Like, do you have that kind of thought process as far as how you want to go about with the movie, or you think of the story first, you have the vision, and then the equipment is out, you think of after the fact?
So for the Texas Witch, and for most of the okay, so the difference between the Texas Witch and let's say Brett's movies, um, or any of the other bigger feature films that I've done, it's the difference has been on the Texas Witch, I was the director and DP.
Mm,
And my equipment is basically the same. For Brett's movies, it's the same equipment. So I knew what equipment I had going into it, and I know the capabilities and the boundaries I can push with my equipment. The difference is that with Brett's films, we had first ACs that were experienced, and with the Texas Witch, we had one guy that was not very experienced as a first AC. So there was a lot of focus pulling issues, and when you're on Steadicam pulling focus out in the woods and you're running through chasing people through the woods, it's something you either gotta have it or you don't. And thank God the first AC that I had that wasn't very experienced, he gave it all he got, and he did okay.
okay.
Then, like about a little more than halfway through the film, he had to leave to take care of some family issues, and I was in a position to where I was able to bring on a regular first AC that I've worked with on several features and other short films for, and his name's Thomas Campbell, and he's a great guy, phenomenal first AC. And I can't tell you that those last 4 days of shooting were so much different than the first week and a half.
Mm,
I can't say it enough that the an experienced crew that you've worked with repeatedly is the best thing on any movie set, because now no matter what gear you have, they will always back you up and be willing to push the limits of a look of a film to something that's not been seen before. So when it came to the Texas Witch, I read through the whole script. I try not to formulate anything visually until I get out on set and see what it looks like. Most of the time, and I learned a lot. One thing that I learned a lot with Brett and his movies is that storyboarding is like a great outline, and you can almost change the background and put it in any situation. But once you get out on location, all that choreography falls into place, and now it becomes something more tangible to look at. So suddenly all those camera angles, all those push and pans and tilts and Steadicam or tracks or sticks or whatever, all that changes. It all, from reading the script, I try not to formulate any ideas until the time I get on set. Now, on other features where the DP and the director get all the pre-pro time and budget to go out on location and work storyboards and shit like that,
mm,
um, those I truly appreciate, because now you're able to spend more time on just one or two shots, as opposed to an independent film where you don't have time to go scout locations and set up all of these shots beforehand. You just get out there and you shoot from the hip,
yeah.
and you try to get more takes, more angles in, because and you end up having less time working on just one or two shots.
Right.
Now, that's not always been the case with Brett, because a lot of the stuff we do on Steadicam, so they're like oneers, and we didn't always have like a full gaff team, crew to set up lights. We probably have 6 to 8 lights and a couple of 1Ks or something, 750s, and we just like throw them in the hall, throw them up there. You got 10 minutes to light this, just put it behind the door, and then we're shooting.
Right.
We only got 5, 6 days to shoot,
Right.
a Brett movie. And that was early on, and that was something that we understood going in, you know, with ITN, is that we're going to do a half dozen films and we're just going to bang them out as best as we can. And so that's where I think I kind of excelled, having that news background of being able to shoot things in one take
Right.
in natural light and, figure out that choreography on the fly. And so with Brett, you got 5 days, 6 days to
Hmm.
shoot, and you pack it in, and you're only working from like 7 to 5 because he doesn't like to work after night,
Yeah.
after
Yeah.
dark hours,
ten
and I
hour days.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. Oh my God, that's like the best thing in the world
Yeah.
is to not, you're working a 10-hour day and you're done.
Yeah.
And so, I really get a lot of leeway with Brett on how we shoot. Um, and it sets up a lot of flow for editing.
So for you though, considering how Brett has like a week's worth of shooting, and there's a lot of setups that you guys have to have prepared for to keep things moving forward here. Um, do you prefer that pace of work, or are you? I mean, do you get are you comfortable with it? You're okay with it, or deep down inside, do you not like it, but you do it just to get through the day? And do you prefer longer time with preparation and more resources? And I know that's everyone's dream though, but like, do you have a preference about how you like to work at a certain pace when it comes to making films for yourself?
Mm, So, so for Texas, so for a lot of the features, we had 2 weeks, 3 weeks to
Mm,
shoot. Some were like 800,000, $900,000 budgets where we had 3 weeks to shoot. And yeah, I loved having all the time to prepare for just a couple of scenes every day.
mhm.
I do like the challenge of being able to shoot a feature film in 5, 6, 7 days. I like being able to not have storyboards and just go in and shoot from the hip because it feels more organic. And
Mm,
for me as a cinematographer, it makes it easier for me to follow the story because now I'm focused on what is essential. Now, if I had 3 weeks to shoot Brett's movie, it wouldn't be just what's essential. It would be how can I set up these master shots that are just cinematically beautiful that don't overpower the story. The last thing I want to do is shoot a movie that is better than the actual story. I think as my job as a
mm.
cinematographer is to enhance what the screenwriter had and the director has. And as many film festivals as I've been to, and a lot of animosity about losing, a best cinematography to
Yeah,
like a skating video or some
yeah,
movie
yeah,
that just looks like total ass, and I'm like, but mine looks so much more beautiful,
yeah.
but at the same time, I'm like, we ended up winning Best Picture, or we end up winning Best Director, Best Ensemble, Best Texas Film. So the cinematography is always running parallel and an asset to the directing and the story itself.
So when you look at the films you've done with Brett, and some of the other work as well too, for you, what do you feel like is some of your best work as far as the cinematography aspect is concerned? Because I believe, if I remember correctly, you did do the cinematography for what was it, Rodeo Thief, right? Am I mistaken in that? I
Yeah.
think you did. Okay, I love what you had done with that movie, as far as the cinematography is concerned. And that's one thing about Brett's films that I really do appreciate. And I really mean it when I say this, is that I like how he just lets the camera sit still for the for the scene to play itself out, which obviously gives you the opportunity for you to be able
Yeah.
to give it more life and a little more texture as well too. And that movie for me, I thought like was one of his absolute best as far as the look of the film is concerned, and the story as well too. But for you though, what do you consider to be some of your best work under that in that capacity there?
So on the feature film side, um, so well, I hope you've seen some of these. Well, you'll see Texas Witch, and
Mm,
I I like what I did with Texas Witch, the Texas Witch.
right.
Um, I had 2 weeks to shoot. I had a week of prep. Um, it did suck because we were out in the woods, and it was during that spring where it was raining for like 5 months straight in Texas and Louisiana
Okay.
and Mississippi, and we had all kinds of tropical storms in the Gulf, and it rained literally for like 4 months. And so we're out in the middle of this pine forest, 3,000 miles, square miles, and it's just the humidity was horrible. But I liked, and I just finished the rough cuts, so I've actually seen every clip again. And while I'm shooting it, I'm kind of like editing the movie, so I know what works and what doesn't work.
Okay.
I get back and I
You talking
edit
about you're
it.
editing it while you're shooting on set, or you're
Yeah,
okay?
yeah, that's another news thing. Is that when I was
Uh,
shooting news, I couldn't shoot tons of B-roll. I had to shoot only what I needed for the story. So that's shoot to edit was kind of like a little bit in the back of my mind, but it was editing as I'm shooting.
Interesting.
It's a little
Okay.
bit different, and it saves my ass. So I think I like the Texas Witch. I like a, I like some of the Meteor, some of the work
I
that I
like
did in
Meteor. Yeah, Meteor was really good.
some
I
of the
like that.
Steadicam shots while they're telling the stories,
Yeah.
wrapping around while they're shooting guns. I think was awesome. Outlaws Buckle was just let's have fun.
I like that movie. I've only
Uh,
seen it twice though, but I did like the film.
yeah, Outlaws Buckle was. We had a lot of fun shooting that. We were in a jail, and it was like let's change it into a monster movie or something, and we were, with Brett, sometimes we're up for changing the script as we're
Yeah.
shooting, and
Yeah.
last minute changes. Um, Buckskin, I can't. Buckskin, Honor of Thieves, The Rodeo Thief, Copper Bill, 90 Feet from Home.
Yeah.
I like everything that I've done with Brett,
But
and
do you
each one is different. I can't say
right?
that there's a favorite out of any one of them because they're all different.
Well, okay, so let me ask this here because I'm not sure if this is probably a fair question to ask, but I'm curious to see what your thought process is when it comes to how you go about it. Um, Out of all the films you've done so far, in this case, let's talk with Brett's films. What's the one that you took the most satisfaction of? Shooting it, getting done with the film, and then watching the editing and seeing the final form, the final comment to say, where you walked away, you thought, you know what? After all the shit that I went through, I am so content with what I saw right there. I mean, I understand you love other things about what you've done before with your previous work, but is there one that comes to mind you really that you made you had a different perception about what you went through and then the outcome of it?
Yeah. So I wasn't the cinematographer. I was a Steadicam operator in a movie called uh, Devil's Deal, but Devil's Acid. And
I don't think I've seen that one. No.
yeah, Eric Gibson, he's a cool guy, director. And I liked a lot of the stuff that I shot on it. Animal Among Us is probably.
I saw a bit of that movie. I didn't finish watching it, but I liked what I saw so far as the cinematography is
I
concerned.
think that was we had a really good gaff team on that, and everybody was from LA, so I really had to fake it, my knowledge, and but in the end, I think I really like the way that it looks. So I'm going to say Animal Among Us,
Okay.
90 Feet from Home, and The Texas Witch.
Okay.
I think those are the three feature films that I DP'd that I liked. The outcome of how it was shot, and really made it feel like like I was watching a real movie. Like this could hold up in any theater for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, at
Okay.
Cinemark or whatever. I think those movies really hold up on big screens, and I liked the directors of each one
Mhm.
because they were really. It's like I've never. I the cinematographer director relationship is so fragile, but the relationships I've had with every director has been. I wouldn't say fragile. The fragile is the least of the things that they were. They were They were the most gung ho. Let's see how far we can push things, and if it breaks, oh, sorry, it broke. Well, then we'll take a step back.
Right,
I
right,
mean,
right.
like with Animal Among Us, I was strapped on to the front of an ATV flying through the woods with Piper, one of the actresses who had never driven an ATV in her life. And I'm strapped with a red camera, Zeiss lenses. It's probably $70,000, and I'm strapped on some boards with some bungee cords, and we're flying just so I can get this, frontal shot of them on the ATV. And it was, it was
Oh
kind of
man,
scary,
I'm
but
curious to see
we
this.
took risks, and every shot that we took risks on paid off because they're all in the movie, and they look great. And I'm glad we took those risks. Um, 90 Feet from Home was the first time I'd ever shot something with Brett. I
Yeah.
had worked another short film with him, but I brought in like one tungsten light that I shined through a window, and it landed on the bed and dresser, and it sort of looked like morning sunlight. And I think from that point on, he and I were like, we were the best friends on when it comes to movies. And then we went to a film festival that was like really cheesy, and we just heckled all the movies because they were horrible and they were winning, and we could tell it was a fixed film festival. But he and I
Mm,
sat there and we just heckled the entire time, and it was fantastic. And we kind of realized we both have the same.
sensibilities and sense of humor.
When it comes to making a movie, we have
Yeah.
this uh, ethics. Nothing outside of that set matters. Well, for me, anyway, nothing matters. Family, kids, wives, girlfriends. I've had so many bad relationships, or not so many bad relationships. I've had a lot of great relationships that had bad moments because I didn't want to be a boyfriend on set. I didn't want to have to answer a phone call,
Mm,
and hey, I'm working. I'm making a movie.
yeah.
Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And I think Brett appreciated that
That
no,
dedication. Yeah.
yeah, that dedication, no
Yeah.
nonsense attitude.
Yeah.
And then I ended up winning an award. So then I like chunked it in his face that this film festival was legit. And we laughed forever about it. We still laugh about it to this day. And now it's like our sets were so, he tells me enough of everything that I need to know. And then from that point on, it's boom, 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 we're done. So that's what I like about shooting with Brett. And Copper Bill was the first movie that I shot for him. And for me, that was I thought for sure he was going to use Michael, 3M, to shoot his first feature film. And I just came out of nowhere, with my Steadicam, and I did one Steadicam shot on a short film for him, and I
Mm.
and I know he liked it a lot. And then after that, he's like, "Hey, you want to do DP this feature? It's got Eric Roberts in it. It's got fucking
Shawn Michaels, Dean
yeah,
Kane.
Shawn
Yeah. Yeah.
Michaels, and it's got fucking Dean Kane. It's
Yeah.
got all these great actors in it."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I would totally love to do that." So I had to put on my A game, and I think him giving me the freedom to work the work off of the choreography that he and the actors were doing. Um, that choreography, watching them interact, and then saying, "Okay, as a camera operator, as a viewer, this is how we should see it, and this is why." And a lot of the times I don't even have to explain why because Brett already knows. He can see it. Oh yeah, yeah, I get it. Let's go. Let's roll. And with Brett, he's only like, let's do it in 2 takes. If we have to do 3 takes, I'm gonna get mad. If we have to do more than that, things are really gonna get, pissy. And so, with Brett, that mentality is like you get it in 3 shots or less. And so I love that. I love that challenge of being able to do these shots, and like with Laura Menzi and 90 Feet from Home and Heather Williams, some of my favorite shots revolved around them. And it was like spur of the moment. Okay, we rehearse it. I'm going to shoot it like this. But then as soon as they came in 100% acting, I was like, the whole movie just changed. That whole scene just changed. And so I improvise a move, you know, and I start moving the camera differently, and they rolled with every punch. And it was like, what would any cinematographer ask for is
Mm.
a little preparation, a little insightful, and actors and crew that can roll with punches. And I think that's why that movie, you know, looks as great as it does. I
Yeah.
really like how it turned out. Yeah. So, I mean, the progression of the feature films that I started on, um, I guess most of what's really been really progressed, gotten better over the last several years is my Steadicam work for those, because I do a lot in a lot of the features that I shoot.
Mm.
So the Steadicam and the lighting has gotten a lot better. Um, you know, that's a tough question. I mean, I don't know. Repeat it again.
Let me look at my notes now. Well,
No.
so I guess let me ask you. So let me rephrase the question a little bit better because I realized this because I was thinking and talking at the same time. So from the films I have seen that you've worked on, 90 Feet from Home, Alice Buckles, Rodeo Thief, what else? Oh, Meteor, and the little that I have seen with Animals Among Us, I have noticed a difference in quality in terms of the cinematography that I've seen have you've where I believe you've gotten better. So my question to you was that what have you for yourself did you when you because I know I know for you feel that you've gotten better, but was there certain things that you've looked back on that you may have seen on 90 Feet from Home that you can recall you felt like this looked really good, but then upon rewatching the film again, you realize, oh, you know, I could have done this a little bit better now. You know, this time around with the next project that I'm working with Brett, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to do this again. So techniques, perspective, anything that may have changed along the way for you that you thought
Um,
you could have improved that you thought was good at the time, but nowhere near as good as you thought it was after watching the film.
so I think most of them have actually looked better than I actually thought they were.
Okay.
Honestly, I think a lot of them, when I'm shooting them, I'm like, I mean, this looks great and it feels great to me right now, but I'm always nervous, especially like, you know, with Brett's movies, because I don't do any of the editing. I don't get to sit in on the editing. So
Mm.
actually seeing that being put together, those movies put together, is it's always a surprise in the end. I never see it until it's actually showing on a big screen somewhere, or, you know, Amazon or something like that.
So did Brett
Um,
send you out a link to have a look at the film in its final form before it gets released out to any sort of streaming platform or festival?
yeah.
No. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, he'll send me like clips every now and then,
Mm.
maybe a rough cut, you know, and I'll watch them sometimes. But I mean, one of the bigger issues I had early on in my career is that I never really liked reading scripts. I didn't like reading the script before I went out there. And a lot of that was early on in my career, the directors that I was working for really had a specific look that they wanted. And I kind of felt, if I read the script, I start getting in all these visuals of how I think the movie
Uh,
should
okay.
go.
I see.
So there were a lot of times where I didn't read the script just because I wanted to hear the director and the writer talk about it. And I wanted to hear and see the choreography as it played out, and then formulate the way that I was going to shoot it.
Interesting.
Animal Among Us is probably one of the better looking films that I've shot.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we didn't have hardly any preparation for that. And there's a great story behind it, but it is one of the best looking films that I think I've shot. And so John Woodruff calls me. He
Yeah.
calls me up in early summer. He says, "Hey, you know, I've been following your stuff on Facebook, looking at some of the stuff you post, and it looks great." He says, "I have this movie that I've been working on for like 2.5, 3 years with his DP, who was from Brazil." And he goes, "We've been working on this for 2.5, 3 years. We're about to go into production in about a week and a half, 2 weeks. Or no, we're about to go into production in about 2 weeks." Well, this was at the time of the elections, and they were like suspending all travel to third world countries and visa
Mm.
issues and shit like that. So Brazil was one of the bigger countries that got hit. So he got stuck back in Brazil on visa issues, and they were supposed to be shooting in 2 weeks, and he wasn't going to make it out. So Brett had, I mean, John had to find a replacement in less than 2 weeks for this film that they had been working on for almost 3 years. And it was a, it was a good sized budget. I mean, it was under 100,000, but that I think made it more viable as a movie that could sell
Right.
once it got into the distribution stage. And
Right.
John taught me a lot about all that stuff, and a lot of it makes sense. Um, so he got stuck in Brazil, and John just calls me up and says, "Hey, we start shooting in about 2 weeks. Can you come out and shoot? We have two red cameras, and we're working on this lens package, stuff like that. Everything's in the place, everything's ready to go. I just need a DP." And I was like, "Well, hell yeah, I'm down for this. I'm really down for this." And he sent me the script, and I read a couple of pages, and I just, yeah, whatever, just tossed it aside. I fly, whatever. Um, so I get up to Ohio. We're out on location, and from that point on, was every moment was really talking with John about the scenes, and he would, unknowingly, he's given me everything I needed to know about how we should move forward shooting this, and then the rest of it I just sort of pieced together myself. Um, and a lot of directors, it seems that it was like that early on. Circus of the Dead is another movie that I thought was really has an interesting look because it's supposed to be that late 70s, early 80s grindhouse kind of like horror flick. It's got a
Mm.
little bit of comedy, it's it's a different type of movie than Animal Among Us.
Okay.
Visually, they're completely different. But with in respects to both directors, I think they both look phenomenal and it's hard to compare these movies to each other. Like which one do I think looks better? I can't really say that because I didn't shoot Among Us with Circus of the Dead in mind. I didn't shoot Circus of the Dead with Animal Among Us in mind.
Mm.
And the techniques that I pulled and tricks that I pulled from Animal Among Us, 90 Feet from Home, Meteor, 72 Hours, you name all these other movies that I've been on, Room 203, all the techniques and things that I did, I try to make unique to that movie. And I try not to repeat. I try not to repeat anything. I think every movie, every script deserves its own look.
Right.
And even though it's hard to do, I think it's very possible to do.
So when you're shooting when you're on the set, then now that you've shared this insight that you don't really necessarily like to look into the script ahead of time to kind of just kind of walking in more neutrally with a little less preconceived notion about what you think it should look like. Um, where did that start for you? Was that something you just prefer to do from the very beginning, or did you have an experience where you read a script and then having those having the visions of the look of the film kind of like disrupted how the director wanted you to do it, and you're just like, I can't do it this way? Like, what was that for you?
Yeah, that's happened. That's happened a couple of
Okay.
times. And I think it goes back to my news being in news,
Okay.
is that nothing is ever scripted. I
Right.
mean, you just run out there in the streets with your camera and you hope you come back with a great story. Um, so that's like what it was on movie sets early on all the short films that I was working on. It was I didn't want to read the script. I had an idea. I would talk to the director, the writers. They would tell me the story from beginning to end, but just listening to them sort of gave me the visuals that I needed. Um,
Mhm.
it was that was I think comes back from being in news where I watched the story unfold in front of me instead of being dragged through a story. Some movies are just horribly shot and written to where it's like you're just dragging the viewer, from scene to scene, and there's
Yeah.
no cohesion, there's no smooth transition from one scene to the next. It's just like a bunch of random stuff just thrown together. But in news, you had to link all of those scenes together, otherwise your story didn't make sense. So I think that's when I start shooting the films. I'm like, I'm shooting to edit and I'm editing as I'm shooting. And then at the same time, I'm trying to follow the story as a viewer, not just the cinematographer, where I know too much of what's about to happen. I kind of want to experience it just like the viewer would for the first time. And I think to me that makes the most intriguing types of movies is when you're moving along with the main actors, trying to see what's happening and what's figuring it out.
So,
Um,
but when you're doing that though, I mean, do you? I mean, you don't. I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and believe me, and I think, and I understand it makes sense for you, but when if you're working with somebody who is accustomed to, hey, read the script, I want you to get an idea of what's going on here and prepare for whatever. Um, do you tell them firsthand, listen, I don't do that. I like to do it like this because of these reasons. And I think it's beneficial for you to allow me to do it this way because I can set up the shots the way you like it with all the equipment that I have to prepare for that. I mean, like what's your communication with the directors that you've never worked with before that would have these protocols in place for them to have that set up for them?
So I mean, there are a few directors that I would talk to, constantly about the movie, and they'll be, what do you think about this scene? Blah 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 blah, asking me questions about how do you think we'll end up shooting this. Then at that point, I am kind of like forced into reading the script because I need to
Yeah.
comfort them and make sure that they know I'll be able to get the shot no matter what. So I've had a couple of run-ins with directors where they started questioning me about shots in the script and what do you think about this? What do you think about that?
Mm.
And I'm like, hey, you know what? Hold on, let me get right back to you in just a minute. Or, they'll call, hey, can we talk about the movie? I said, yeah, hold on, give me a few hours. Can I call you back? I'll skim through that script as fast as possible, just to get a basic idea.
Right.
Um, sometimes, Animal Among Us, I mean, I didn't tell John that I didn't read the script until after we had started winning awards and started winning at film festivals and things. And it was like, it was the greatest thing in the world. And then we're on the red carpet at one point, and I was like, yeah, I never read the script. I don't, up until that point, I didn't like reading scripts at all. I
Mm.
liked the stories. I liked them if I wasn't going to shoot them. I love reading them if I'm not going to shoot them.
I see. Okay.
But at the time, I kind of feel as a cinematographer early in my career, I was trying to adapt to what the director wanted to see. Now, as a DP, there are things that I want to see. Now, I guess my evolution as a cinematographer is now this is what I think is more appropriate for this scene in your movie. I understand what you want as a director and what you want to see, but if we set it up like this, so my communication over the years has gotten a lot better.
Okay.
I will definitely say that, and my communication in introducing a different angle or a different shot or a different perspective or a different camera move um, has probably been the biggest uh, advancement as a cinematographer that I've made. Being able to communicate
Right.
effectively with the director. I know that's what you want, but here's what I think you do, and here's why, and here's what it looks like. And a lot of times, they'll want to start. Well, no, I really want to do this, and then I'll just flip my camera monitor around. I'll say, well, I recorded it on the rehearsal, and here's what it looks like. And they'll watch it, and they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, let's just do that. And sometimes and it 9 times out of 10 it works. You know.
And I'm sure Brett will mind me sharing this story, but because I'm curious about how, if at any point did you ever have to step up while you're doing cinematography, DOP work, and then something happens where you have to come in and say, all right, I'm gonna have to direct this scene now. Because Brett shared before that there are days where he's just had it, and then he may pass on the buck to someone else to do it. Like he said Tiffany had done it before. He asked Tiffany to do it. I don't think he's mentioned your name, but I would assume it may have happened just based on your reactions where he says, hey, I can't do it today. Can you handle the shots? And
Yeah.
then I'll come back. So under those circumstances for yourself, just at this conversation we're having though, I mean, I would imagine it's not a difficult thing for you to transition to, but I can imagine there might be a sense of unpreparedness you may have in that respect of how, okay, well, what do I need to do now to get everything else in motion here? Because normally I don't talk to the actors. Now I got to talk to them now. who are they, or so on and so forth. Like, what's the biggest transition for you under those circumstances? At least in this case, let's focus on Brett's films, where that was an experience that you would have had, and how would you go about handling that?
Yeah, so I mean that's happened, several times with Brett's movies. It's like here, yeah, it's not a big deal. It's a relatively easy scene. Sometimes he's not clicking or very
Yeah,
patient enough with some actors who are a little bit more
yeah,
need a little bit more attention, and it's like yeah, it's happened several times. With you just go with the flow, and that's what's so great about working with Brett is that oh God, he's a really easygoing director. And once you understand Brett, and then it becomes very easy to talk to Brett. Once you can talk with Brett and communicate with him, and he's a very good communicator, he'll tell you exactly what he likes and doesn't like.
right.
It just gets better and better and easier and easier. Now there've been a couple of times where I've where I felt like I like overstepped my boundaries, by doing a little too much of that co-directing when it wasn't really needed, and I remember one time on this movie, I think it might have been Meteor, and it was a post-apocalyptic whatever, and I was like, well, make sure nobody shaves. I want to see some grisly faces, and I don't want to know, you know, the women coming in with their eyebrows all nice and trimmed and done. This is
Yeah,
post-apocalyptic, man. It's there. You don't have the luxuries of, uh, you know, hygiene. And he just, I think it's in an email or a text message. I have to look for it. But, he just basically put me in my place and was like, yeah, I know what I'm doing as a director, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of just rolls his eyes, and then that's when you sort of get the feeling, okay, I'll leave you alone. But honestly, I do learn a lot from Brett as a director, and it made my transition to directing easier, even though I was doing it in all the short films previously.
hmm,
It wasn't until I started doing a lot of feature films with Brett and a few other directors um, that co-directing was kind of like it was my an initiation, I guess, or like an internship.
right.
Was watching other first-time directors go through trial and tribulations, and being tried by fire, to watch them make mistakes and things like that. And then later, when I started directing, try to remember that those are the mistakes I don't want to fall into.
For you, what's the biggest because I asked Brett this, what's his relationship like when it comes to making movies, and he pretty much said it up bluntly that it's a love hate relationship. He's like, I feel like I quit. I want to quit every day, which actually really surprised. But I did like his honest answer behind it. But for you though, like, what's your relationship like, at least now, or what it was before, what may have changed when it comes to the actual filmmaking process? So from a DOP standpoint, and now from a filmmaking standpoint, what's the biggest thing that that you have the most love hate relationship with in terms of filmmaking for yourself?
I think it's technology.
Okay.
People are all the same. I think my love hate relationship comes with, um, I think it's with the technology. I recently did a short film. And I mean, we had 3 days to shoot it. It was at the beginning of spring when, like, remember when I told you it was
Yeah.
raining for 4 months
Yeah.
straight.
Yeah.
And we're in Shreveport, Louisiana, and you can't get any more humid, rain soaked, saturated grounds than that. And we're out in the middle of the woods. And it was an old, a movie set from Salem. I don't know if you ever watched that old show about the witches, Salem. It was
Oh,
on for a whole season
oh, okay. I've heard of that show. Yeah, I know what you're
on,
talking about now.
I can't remember what it
It's like
was on.
AMC or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And it was a great show. So we were actually using the town this town that was set up for Salem, is an old lot, had some buildings, constructed stuff like that. And we're shooting out there in the middle of this humidity and for days. And that wasn't the first shoot I had during those 4 months. I mean, I was in a lot of rain. But at one point, we're on the third day, very last day of shooting. I had filled this card, my media card, all the way up. We were just rolling through. Okay. The first day we got rained out. So the second day we had to make up for the first day. And we had to do pickup shots for the third day because we had to do some makeup on the third day from the first day also. Third day
Mm,
comes around, we're shooting all day long. We get to the very last scene and the very last take. And there's maybe 2 minutes left on my card of media space.
mm,
And my first AC goes, hey, you got 2 minutes. I know this scene's only like 45 seconds long, but do you want to put in another card swap just in case? And I was like, nah, no, we'll make it. And then I looked at him and I second guessed myself and I go, no, we better do it. So he hands me another media card. I stick it in my camera, I close it, and I go to wipe my finger across the touch screen, and my camera just flashes. The whole screen just blinks, flashes, comes back up, and then it shows that the media had been deleted.
oh man.
So everything that we shot that day was gone, and we only had 45 seconds left of one scene. It was a quick scene, her walking out of one of the houses. And it was just that was it. And that moment, I mean, we cried, literally bawled, cried on set. And but we recouped, we rescheduled, reorganized, we went back out there for one day, we reshot, and that whole day we reshot that whole day with some additional scenes, and it turned out a lot better.
Yeah.
I think I won't know because we'll never see that footage. So it's hard to say.
Uh,
And the director and the producers, they were thrilled that we had this great movie finished. But technology is probably, I literally questioned whether or not I should continue shooting movies after
because
that
of the
happened,
technology, because of
because of
technology.
that moment of a drive being wiped out. And then you sort
Yeah.
of think about all the money, the resources, time, and effort that just gets lost, because of a glitch or static, or a little humidity gets inside the camera and suddenly
Yeah.
everything's trashed. And those thousands of dollars that you spent organizing and all that time is just gone. And you, as a DP director, you're sort of responsible for that. And it sort of really does play against your ego about what a failure you might be.
Yeah.
And then you got to hope to God that these stories don't ever come out, while you're searching for another job. so,
So, but let me ask you about that though, because so here's the thing. When it comes to filmmaking, it's a the industry from what I understand, and I've kind of known for a while, but it's always about who and having the connections to be able to get certain things done. But what I've also come to find out too is that it's also certain people may not want to commentate on certain things just because they don't want to give the bad impression of like, hey, I didn't like this experience too much, but I like the outcome from that experience. And when what you just described right now, where you're saying that you don't want to certain things, don't want to reveal, but just because you want to make sure that with whatever the final cut comes out of that film is good enough that it's going to showcase that, hey, this guy's really good, we want to hire him for this, or let's give him more resources for that. So and I'm trying to be very careful how I can ask it, because I don't want to, I'm not trying to ask to put in your position where you're going to say that you don't want to say, but I'm curious about, when you're saying that, um do you feel like there's a point where you can commentate on certain things that, like in this particular situation where I deleted the footage, I deleted this whole film that we just shot, but now that you've already completed the film, is that not a concern for you to have to share that, or are you comfortable with yourself knowing that I have a reputation where the work speaks for itself, so therefore I'm comfortable sharing that story?
it's kind of both.
Okay.
Um, because I've been with other really good, fabulous directors and DPs that have all had the same nightmares
Okay.
happen on set. I normally don't like to talk about it until well after the project is done,
Right.
just because you don't want to, I don't know, lose the opportunity and potential of other work because of said horror stories. When it comes to
Right.
equipment, oh, his equipment, his camera crapped out. We don't want
Right.
that to happen. So let's get somebody else who has a newer camera or
Right.
something ridiculous
Right. Right.
like that. But yeah, there have been many experiences. Almost every film is that way. uh, every movie I could tell you there was at least one or two really bad experiences, but the outcome of those projects certainly outweigh the bad aspects of it. And it's been from everything from having to share a DP credit with a director of photography who didn't know fucking his ass from a hole in the ground, or um, having producers that have never produced anything before suddenly show up with their ego and start bossing around and wanting to be pampered. And it's like, that's not what a producer's job is. As a producer, you should be out here sweating the most.
Yeah.
You should be out here sweating your ass off instead of bitching and griping about, you needing shade or it's so hot.
Mm.
God forbid you should be an actor and a producer or a director all in the same project, because then
Yeah.
it's you just, I don't know. It's been a lot of horror stories like that where
Yeah.
you know I did a feature film and the director wanted a high school buddy of his to be the DP just so he could help him get IMDb credits. And I understand on a lot of movies, you have a lot of friends that you bring back regularly. Oh, my
Right.
friend's going to come and help me with this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if your friend is detrimental to the look of that film, you should really be able to figure that out on day one. And some people did, some people didn't. And, in the end, it kind of shows. And then it's like, well, that guy never DP'd another movie in his life. And if he did, it totally looked like shit because he couldn't fake it and he didn't have anybody there to rely on to show him how to frame or composition or how to light or. And granted, some of these guys are really fantastic still photographers, but when it comes to motion, they're just horrible, absolutely horrible.
You know,
Um,
I I've heard quite a few stories, in this case off record, where I've had people who have shared stories about what they've experienced on set. And in some cases you learn these stories like years after the fact. Like one of the most famous behind the scenes stories is The Godfather, where the story to make the movie was a very tumultuous shoot for virtually everyone on that set. And then it's become so famous now that they're, in my mind, I remember thinking that should be a movie on its own, because the stories that you hear about what it took to make the film, it sounds unbelievable, but I would believe 95% of what I've heard is virtually true, to the point where now they're making a TV show out of it. So there are certain processes about the filmmaking process that I meant to say that I think people don't really understand, that is extremely difficult for a number of different reasons. And I know obviously you understand what those reasons can be, and it can be varying for a number of different, for each project. But the one thing that I've always picked out a lot, especially as of late, where I've become fans of directors who have worked on a number of projects, the most consistent things I've come across with these directors, like Brett's been an example of that, Jesse V. Johnson, William Kaufman, that I've come across in the last couple of years, they've all worked with the same group of people behind the scenes and also in front of the camera too, as far as acting and so on and so forth. Where I've started to learn as the years have gone by that that's really the secret ingredient that's going to help their films get better along the way when it comes to who they brought on to work on the projects. And if they weren't able to bring them on the previous project, they brought them back in the next project, because whatever project they worked on before, for one reason, didn't work out, but they were able to bring it back again for this time around. So it's like a I wouldn't say like a conveyor belt of just the same thing over and over again, but just it's just creating a project that best fits for whoever can help make the vision come to life. But it's
yeah,
consistently the same with who you brought.
yeah,
So, I think when you're explaining, when you're sharing this story, like all I keep thinking about is just I was gonna ask you, like, so do you keep the same as far as like the crew is concerned, who you work on, in this particular case, the Texas Witch, or some of the other short films here, when you're working on your own, that you've noticed from working with Brett and previous other directors, that you picked up on that, okay, bring back who is going to always make it better for you. You kind of shared with that before from previous
yeah.
projects here, but I mean, is that a consistent thing for you across with virtually everything you do when you're making the films on your own? Is that more or less the same approach?
For me, yes. When it's a project that I'm producing, yes, I try to bring on the same gaffers, the same grips, the same first ACs. the same production assistants, some of the same costume and makeup people. And I mean, you can't do it on every film,
Right.
mostly because, sometimes they're scheduled on something else. So you do have two or three people in each department that you rely on. Like with Brett, we use a lot of the same audio, the same first ACs. I mean, he's used me, I think, on 6 features. He's used Jeff Ham to do a lot of the editing on
Mm.
almost all of his features. And now Jeff even shot one movie. Scott Ross did a lot of the early on. He did a lot of the audio for some of Brett's movies. Then he started doing first AC work for me on some of Brett's movies, and now recently he did Overlords as the DP. So he does use all of us consistently, and sometimes it just rotates, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Um, for the movies that I produce, I really do like using the same people over and over. And there's a few reasons for that. One is when you use a new crew or you're on a set where everybody's new to you, they know
Right.
how to do their job, but they're new to you, they're new to that set. It just seems like everybody comes in every day and wastes about 10, 15, 20 minutes out of every hour talking about who they are, what they did, where they came from, who their dog is, their family, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, how many kids they got, all that
Yeah.
shit. But for me, I don't care. I really don't want to hear any of that stuff, although we do. You got to be nice, and you learn about people and their families along the way. But for a movie, when you come in and you only got 7 days to shoot, you're limited on your schedule, your budget, the time you got to cram all this stuff into, you don't have time to
To
make
create
small
small
talk.
talk. Yeah.
So when you use the same people over and over, all that small talk tends to just go away because you already know these people, you've worked with them. During the pandemic, we did 4 movies, 5 movies together, or something like that.
Yeah.
4 movies. And so it was the same crew over and over, and we all knew what we were going through, so we didn't have to sit there and talk about our personal lives. It came up in conversation. Not gonna lie, we have the best time on Brett's movies. We have a great time. We joke around. They're like family. But when it comes to you telling a story and suddenly, lunch is done, I'm gonna cut you off mid sentence. Finish your story later. I've got to go do some shit. I got to go make a movie.
Yeah.
That's the best part of using the same people over and over, is that they understand you, you understand them, and the common goal is to make that project as good as possible in the amount of time and resources and money that you have. And me being new on a bigger budget film, I tend to just like, I'm quiet, dude. I don't want to fucking joke around. I don't want to mess around. People, PAs are always joking and harassing, and I tend to like, because there is a lot of money and a lot of reputations at stake. And, they're paying for your time. You're getting paid, so many hundreds of dollars a day to be there for 12 hours a day, 10 to 12 hours a day. Least you could do is focus and pay attention, you
Yeah.
know? So that
That.
only comes when you use the same people. Eventually they learn that habit, they learn that. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the best skills on any movie set, is
Yeah.
to be able to disregard everything the moment you walk out of your house, get in your car, and head out to set. That to me is the best employee. That to me is the best crew.
It's funny because I think some people don't realize, like I was talking to a director, Jesse V. Johnson, not too long ago, and one of the things he told me about his experience, because he worked on a few Steven Spielberg sets, and the first one of the things he apart from Steven Spielberg being a good director, but the one thing he pointed out was that what most people don't realize is that a lot of the people that work on his sets have worked with him for years, and they have an efficiency of how they work smoothly. And he's like, in a lot of ways, as big as those productions are, they turn out things a lot quicker than most TV shows, which are on a tight schedule anyways. But he's able to have his crew and everyone that's working on the set to move things from one to the next, without, in most cases, without a hitch. So, when you look at someone like Spielberg, who I think at one point he released like 2 movies in 1 year because he was able to shoot one film, get it done, and then work on the
Yeah,
next project, and then all of a sudden he's got like 2 films coming out, both are nominated for like 50 Oscars or whatever.
yeah,
You're like, how the hell does he do that? It's because of who he has on set to help make the film, and he has the editors that know what they want, what he wants, and how to put it together and whatever. So it's incredible, like how efficient he is when it comes to his filmmaking. But I don't think people realize it's just like, a lot of it does have to do with the team he has around him to make that happen.
yeah.
But at such a high level, which is
Oh yeah,
very,
yeah.
very rare, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're at that level, I mean, you're getting paid good money. Even a
Mhm.
production assistant, $500 a day, you know, that's good money. I don't
Yeah.
even make $500 a day as a DP on some of the features that I work on. And
Mm.
we're talking $800,000 features. As a
Mhm.
Steadicam operator, on some features I was working like $150 a day with my own gear. And it's like it was more professional at that level and everybody knew their job and it went so smoothly, but it comes with a little bit of, bitterness. It's like at this budget, why was I not making $600 a day as a Steadicam operator plus a rental for my kit? And that sort of creates a bad taste for some people. Now, when you drop that $800,000 budget down to a $20,000 budget or a $15,000 budget or a $10,000 budget feature film, you sort of have to swallow a lot of pride um, to make it work. You have to forget, once you've agreed, I'm going to do it for $150 a day. Once you've made that agreement and decision in your mind, you should still give it 100%, even if you were getting paid as if you were on a Steven Spielberg set at $1,500 a day plus a rental kit. It's the amount of money has a lot to do with how much personality and attitude you have. But in my book, it doesn't matter. $150 a day, $500 a day, you're still going to get 100% out of me, no matter what. There aren't very many film people who are like that.
Yeah.
Brett is like that. Brett is one of the few directors that I think is like that. John Woodruff is one of those guys from Animal Among Us. He's one of
Mhm.
those guys that's like that. Um, and we come Billy Pond's the same way. You come back, you make these movies, and then all of a sudden you see on social media that you've got a composer whining and crying about the low rate that he was paid. And it's like,
Yeah.
but you agreed to that rate.
Yeah.
The movie's done. It's doing phenomenal. You got to keep the rights to your own music and you're selling, the music off your own website. So you got to keep the rights to that. Plus you're getting all this notoriety, plus the money that you got paid for the movie. And yet you're going to sit here and want to talk bad about it.
Yeah.
Some of that,
Yeah. That that's a big issue that I have. It's in seeing when it comes to what people tend to complain about when it comes to making films. And I think that's one of the reasons I think a lot of people take for granted about what the perception about what it takes to make a movie, especially when it comes to like high caliber filmmakers, when it comes to major productions where they think, oh, they're getting paid millions of dollars, of course they're going to complain. And I'm like, that's a really stupid thing to, I hate, if I hurt people's feelings, whatever, but it's a stupid way to think because no matter, and I agree with you 100%. There are certain things that you have to have the right attitude when you're making a project, and no matter what it is. But in this particularly, it's about films. If you're going to make a movie that's under $100,000 and you're making $100 a day for whatever it is, I think what really counts the most is that if you are good on set, but you got along with everybody, which is the most common thing you hear about with people is like, he never bitched and moaned, he did his job, or
yeah,
she never bitched and moaned, she did her job. And in fact, I brought her back again or brought them back again to work on the next project. They didn't pay as well, but they still did the job and they did it really good. Now,
yeah,
because of that amount of work that they put into it, we got a little bit more notoriety. So now I know for a fact I will bring it back for the next one because I know they're more than capable of pulling it off on this
yeah,
time on a larger scale, so on and so forth. So I think some people fail to realize that that's extremely important when it comes to making films is developing good relationship. And
yeah,
that's one of the things I was talking before about how you and Brad and everyone else that I've kind of mentioned here that they all bring the same people back because they all have the same mindset, which is get the job done, do it to the best of your ability, and shut up and just do the work. More or less is how I look at it.
Yeah, 100% on, oh gosh, it's hard to say that, but near 100% of the qualities that I look for in working with a crew, especially if I have anything to do with picking out the crew, is compatibility. If there's no compatibility, your set is going to be a train wreck.
Yeah.
No matter how smart they are, no matter how talented they are, if there's no compatibility, you're just going to be button heads. Um, I did a short film down in Corpus, and uh, we had a guy that was running sound, and he had run sound for things like live events and bands,
Mm.
concerts and stuff like that, but he
Okay.
had never done sound for a movie. So he comes in there with like five microphone stands, five microphones plus a boom, and he's got like this small cramped set, no bigger than this little kitchen area right here behind me. And he's got all these microphone stands all over the place. And I haven't even got in there and set up lights or the camera. We haven't even rehearsed with the actors or anything. And it's like, what are you doing? What is all this in here for? You got to get all this out of here. And he's like, well, then he starts bitching and griping that he went through all that work putting shit in there. And it's like, well, sorry, bro, but first things first, rehearsal, camera, lighting, then your audio comes in. And you don't need all this microphones. We're in a room the size of this kitchen, small. Why do you need five microphones? Nobody's going to be listening to the air conditioning vent down in the corner, or, listening to the water drip under the sink.
Yeah.
You only need one mic to swing back and forth over the actors. And that dude was just obnoxious, and he was friends with one of the executive producers, so he came with a lot of attitude, and it was like, you know,
Entitled.
you just waste like 20-30 minutes of out of every 2 hours doing this shit, and it's like that just interferes with my time. That interferes with choreography. That interferes with rehearsals. Now we got to wait for you to get all this shit out of here so that we can
Yeah.
properly do a rehearsal setup and then
Yeah.
get you in here, and
Yeah.
that's happened on several movies. And that's the part of working with people that you've worked with before. Because, some of the sound guys that I've worked with before, they won't come in there. They'll be the last guys to show up on set, mostly because they know all they got to do is extend the boom, turn it on, hit record, and they're good to go. And they're good at it.
Right.
I've had guys, amateur or not experienced sound guys, on a couple of horror films that always stood in front of the main light, and we're sitting there
Yeah.
about to run a take, and it's like, hey guys, do you see your shadow? And it's like right there on the actor's face. And it's like, they're moving around back and forth. And I was like, do you see your shadow on their face? Yeah. You want to move out of the light? Oh, I'm sorry. And it's little things like that
Yeah.
out of every scene and every take that add up to that 20 or 30 minutes every day, every 2 hours. And by the end of the day, you've lost 2 hours of shooting because of having to train people to understand how to work, or
Right.
training inexperienced people how not to stand in front of the lights. Or if I'm on Steadicam and I'm moving backwards, you got to truck back with me. You've got to move with me. If
Yeah.
they're there and I'm suddenly going to drop to the ground and shoot up, you got to pull your mic back. And I've had so many takes of so many scenes on so many movies just blown because of inexperienced crew members. But,
Yeah. y-
sometimes it's not people that I get to hire. It's, the producers hire these people
Yeah.
based on budget, and it's like they hire who they can get. And it's like, that's going to cost you more in the end.
Yeah.
So the next time we do a movie, you make sure I'm in there picking out the crew. I'll set you up with their day rates, and it'll be a lot easier. You'll save a lot more money. And, recently on another horror movie, they hired like, had all these extras. I mean, like extra PAs and stuff like that, that really didn't do anything. And then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, but
Heard
we're
of those.
paying
Yep.
all of them. And I was like, you could have fired 5 of those PAs and hired one first AC for the same amount of money, and we would be done shooting the movie.
Yeah.
So it's, little things like that. But every producer, every director, like I said before, is working on at their own speed and their own level. So as a DP director, sometimes you just got to come in and see where they're at, level out with them, and then slowly elevate, you know, the quality of what they're doing. And I hope to God that's what I do with every movie that I get on, is that I help elevate the
You know,
quality of what's happening.
it's funny when you're talking about that because I'm also thinking about all these stories we've heard in recent years, where, for example, like what was it, Terminator Salvation, where Christian Bale had that infamous blowout where with, I think it was a lighting guy or somebody who he was just flipping out on. You just hear the recording him just
It was a
shouting at the guy.
DP.
It was a TPS, right? Yes. And it
They
wasn't that.
got
And
him
the
for
thing is,
that.
that it was an experienced DP too. And he's like, I don't know. And then the director McGee was like, I don't know. I didn't see anything, And like a lot of people gave him shit for that. And I remember at that time, I was like, well, that's kind of a direct thing to do. But when you hear the whole story and you realize, everyone had set up the shot a certain way, he was in mode of the character and so on and so forth. And then you realize he had every reason to flip out because the guy, it takes a lot of time and effort to get everything set up, especially when you're doing a larger budget, which obviously,
Yeah.
like I say, it's even more, it's, you have to consider that further. I think it's the same across the board, no matter what the budget is. But the fact of the matter is that he prepared, he was ready to go, and then someone just stalled him. And there were no consequences for that other than him just flipping out of the guy. But who ended up getting the bitter end of the stick was Christian Bale, which he had to make an apology for. And I'm like, man, when I heard the whole story, I was like, I don't think he should have apologized. I think he should have been like, no, he fucked up and he got what he deserved. And now he knows next time not to do that again, because the next time he does it again, the producers will fire him and they will not want to hire him again because he keeps walking into the shot. And then we had Tom Cruise recently when he was doing Mission Impossible 7, where the COVID protocols and people have their beliefs on it. It is what it is. But what I'm getting at is that there are protocols in place, and he's saying, everyone, do your job, do it like this. If you can't do it, leave, because there's a lot of money invested here. A lot of people's
Yeah.
lives are, are at stake. But at the same time, we're in a privileged position to be doing this here, and you are not listening. Either
Yeah.
you are going to do your job or you get out, because there are more people who would want to do this to be in your position right now, and you're just being disrespectful to the whole process. So,
Yeah.
some people get this impression in my mind where some directors or producers or actors may be assholes, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think when you're describing how you like to handle things, from someone's perception, they might think, well, that's kind of a dick move. I don't think so. I think it's just that there's a rhythm. You got to keep it up, and we have no time to waste. And if you can't do it, leave and get
Yeah.
someone else who will do it and who won't bitch and moan and who will just do their job, but will do the job correctly and do it at the highest level. That to me, I think, is the most uh some people who have this perception about how actors are can be true, but I think a lot of it is perception as well too, but under those circumstances. So, I think what you described and what Brett had described too. I've talked to a few other actors and directors as well too to share these stories, that it's really just about respecting the process, which is why, like, I love hearing these stories. I love talking about it, because if you don't understand what it takes to make a film, then this is where you would learn. And then once you're on set, that's when you're really going to get the wake up call, where I think you're going to
Yeah.
understand that it's not an easy thing. And some people think it's glorious, and I don't think it is. As far as making films are concerned, it can be very tedious and low and very slow process in some cases, and very
Yeah.
difficult. But when you see the final cut of the film, that's the icing on the cake. But everything that's leading up to that, that's really where the true story of what it took to make the film is the most interesting for me personally. So, I've said this before on more than one occasion here, but I think with what you just described right now from sharing your stories here, that's important to hear. And if people can't appreciate and can't
Yeah.
respect that, fuck them.
Yeah, you want to, it's great to really, I think these interviews like this, no offense, are really, it's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
There's
Trust me, I
not a
know.
lot of uh, therapy out there for directors, producers,
Yeah,
cinematographers to vent frustrations
yeah,
of things that happen on set, until somebody calls in, gets an interview, and then, oh, well, what happened? Tell me some of the things that happened on that set. And then suddenly in your brain, it's like, oh my God, I get to release all of this, that I've held
Yeah.
up for 2 or 3 years. And then you end up telling things sometimes exactly how they were. Sometimes you hold back because you don't want to create any animosity or
Right.
bad blood. You don't want to stir things up, and you want to keep all of those bridges and all of those connections open, just in case there's another film opportunity to come up. So
Yeah.
talking, it's not anything that's ever talking bad about people on set that you work with. It's certain situations that have happened.
Right.
And 90% of the people that I've worked with previously, I would wholeheartedly, even if I hated them, I would still jump at the opportunity to work for them again. There have been so many, I think there's only like maybe three people out of the out of the 35 years that I've been doing this that I would never, ever work for again. So those people are far and few between. Some people just need more experience and need to learn a little bit more. Some people need to take the self-taught lessons, put those aside, and actually go for structured lessons. Like me, I was self-taught. I never went to film school at all. So everything I had to learn, I learned on set, and sometimes it was out of order. Sometimes it wasn't, the right protocols. Sometimes it wasn't the right way to do things. I've been on a couple where I've worked with professional people, and as a DP, I take the advantage of being able to talk to some actors and stuff like that during the scenes. Some directors will get pissed. They'll actually step in front of you and say, "What are you saying to them?" And then I'll be like, well, no, I was just letting them know that sometimes when they come in, maybe they get a little bit too close. So maybe stay just a little bit further back until I can clear going around a corner or something like that on Steadicam. So some directors are very adamant that nobody else to the actors. Some are really lenient when you do that. And on set is not the place to learn that.
Yeah. You know,
Because then
it's
that leaves a bad taste, sometimes
yeah.
in some people's mouth,
You
if they're
know,
experienced.
one of the more famous stories I've heard about, and I think this is out there for anyone. It's no secret if you follow this stuff, is that on the set of what was it, American History X with Edward Norton, where there was a famous story, was that the story was is that some have said that Edward Norton's the guy who directed the film because apparently the director didn't like the way how Edward Norton liked to approach filmmaking, if you will. And one of the actors, it was I forgot the guy's name. He's a comedian, but he was in the prison scene where that kind of won over Edward Norton's character in the film, in the laundry room scene where they were like sharing jokes and talking about basketball, whatever else. So that actor had talked about how he was warned, hey, Edward likes to tell actors what to do on the set as far as how to approach films or how to approach the scene, whatever. Don't let him do that. Anyway, so the guy says, all right, no problem. And then once Edward Norton started talking to him, he's like, yeah, he was actually really good. He actually gave me some good ideas for how to approach my character, which actually helped me. And I listened to him. And if you watch the scene, it worked out really well because I had the time to talk with him. And I'm kind of condensing the whole story here, but it was a lot more involved here. But he was essentially giving him credit, whereas a lot of people were saying, do not let him do that to you. But his experience was the polar opposite of that. He said it was very beneficial for him and it worked out better for the scene. But he could see where the director was not keen on that because he felt like that was his job and that
Yeah.
no other actor should chime in on that. So I'm not sure if it's a power structure. So it's like you just don't know what's going to work until it actually works. And then it's and then I think the director at one point of the film of that film kind of wanted to take his name off the credits here because he just was not happy with how the final cut turned out because it seemed like Edward Norton was on top of it every single step of the way to the point where it was as if though he was not even needed there in the first place.
Yeah.
So you hear these stories, but when you look at the final cut, you're like, well, this is actually a really good film. But you would never notice that because you're just seeing the final product and
Yeah.
you hear all these things. So
I mean, stories like that happen all the time with,
yeah,
and I can't remember who the director is, but I mean, some actors, God forbid, I haven't really dealt with that aspect of mentality of actors.
right,
Mostly because most of the actors are independent actors. They're not these big Hollywood actors that I've worked with.
Right.
before. Although some of them I have. There have been some really good big actors that I've worked with. And the fact that they've been on many other sets and actually know, they have better insight than I do. One of the first horror films that I ever did, there was an actress from LA who came into Texas, and um, she had all of these ideas, all these great suggestions. Um, but the director and the DP and the writer, it was almost a little bit of like a toxic male group. It was a
Yeah.
horror film. Of course, she was there for eye candy, and the guys they're all, we're the men, we know what we're doing, this is our movie kind of
Yeah.
mentality,
Right.
and they just totally blew her off, and at times they would sit there and talk shit about her behind her back, and oh, she's a problem, blah blah blah. And at one point, I kind of started listening to what she was saying, and I was like, that it makes a lot of sense. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that. But she and I would end up talking between scenes, when the directors would run off with the other DP and start doing shit. And I was the main camera operator. So they would run off and start talking and doing their shit. And she and I would talk about the scenes that she was in and, how we thought it would work better. Then the director, the DP, and producer would come in, and we'd go back to our places, me back on camera, and she'd go back to her, her place.
Right.
And of course, the DP didn't know shit. He's would come and ask me, well, what do you think we should do about this scene? And then he's got the director looking over his shoulder while he's asking me how we should shoot these scenes. And then I would take, the actress's suggestions that I thought were good, mix them with what I knew was going to be good. And then I'd sit there and I would look at the DP and I would tell him, then switch my eyes over to the director and say, that's exactly how we need to shoot this. So it was, there were some people on set that just got in the way of making a good movie when there were other people on set who knew how to make that movie good. So on some movie sets, it comes and it goes.
Yeah.
Then you have people who pretend to know everything about movies, and then they're just won't shut up. And then it's like, dude, if you don't shut up, you're going to be fired. Get off. Just do your job. Leave everything else to us. Some people, and it's like that on a lot of sets.
Yeah.
It all really depends on who it's coming from and whether or not they're credible with the experiences they have and the suggestions that they're making. Um, you know, I, I think at one point I had a girlfriend visit me on a set, and she walked up while we were talking about a scene and made a suggestion about it, and man, I just
I kind of have a feeling where this might, where that conversation might have gone there at that point, but
yeah. So it's like,
yeah.
just there are some people who know what the movie needs. Taking suggestions sometimes can be a problem, but every now and then it doesn't hurt to listen,
Yeah.
just to listen, even if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, with Edward Norton, I can only imagine how insecure the director might have been, and that's where it all comes about compatibility. Was it the crew he was uncomfortable with? Was it the cast he was uncomfortable with? Was it himself that he was uncomfortable with? Um, I basically directed a couple of movies for the directors. I didn't get credit for it. I didn't want credit for it, but I didn't want a project with my name on it coming out and being bad, which is probably what Tom Cruise or Edward Norton, was going through their mind. Oh my God, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I need to step in. I need to step up
Right.
because this is my name. And it's
Yeah.
not just my name, but it's to a sequel of an Oscar nominated and award winning film. I
Yeah.
can't do a sequel to that type of movie and have it suck because the director's uncomfortable, So
Yeah.
I get it. I get it. But then there are some times where you just need to tell actors, shut up. Crew,
I,
shut up.
I want to get your opinion on something here. Because we were talking about how, we kind of touched upon before about how when you have an you have actors who are, they well, let me go back here. So one thing I have a big problem with is promoting. When it comes to promoting television shows, movies, and things of that nature. I understand the reasoning behind it, and I'm not saying I'm against it. I have a problem with how it's done because it's a very formulaic process, and I'm one of those people who does not like it as far as like talking about movies are concerned. And this is where I was touching on slightly when it comes to actors, when it comes to them, working on a set and how they perceive things, how things are handled, and so on and so forth. So, from your perspective now, because you've touched on before about how I think you said it was John, if I'm not mistaken, right, who directed Animal. I'm sorry, yeah, Animals
Yeah,
Among Us.
Animal Among Us.
So he gave you some education about at that time what the distribution process is like to get to sell a movie and so on. And I'm sure there's a whole promotional campaign that goes behind all that as well too that you got to be privy to. But from your perspective, though, now that you've worked with Brett and seeing certain how the promotion on their end works as far as distributions are concerned and promoting the film, having these festivals, what's your perception on that when it comes to promoting movies? And I understand if you may not want to answer the question, but I'm just curious to see what your thoughts are on that because I feel like promoting in certain respects when it comes to films is way is too old. It needs to be updated. There has to be an evolutionary process in my mind where there's a way to promote a film, and you just never know what's going to work. But there's got to be another way other than like, tell me about working on the set with working this director. How was it like? Well, you were excited. How did you get into the character? What was your mindset like? Something about that bothers me, and I don't really care for those type of questions. But for
Well,
yourself,
yeah, because you can actually find that same director, look at five different interviews that he's done, and they're going to ask the same
right,
questions.
right,
They're going to get the same responses. I mean, how many people are still asking, you know, pick any DP or any actor about the first movie that they made?
right.
And it's like you've heard those stories over the decades. Why would you ask something like that? Try to be a little bit more relevant and current, I guess. And when
Yeah.
it comes to promoting the movie, I think that social media and behind the scenes have kind of like ruined the magic of movies.
What do you
I
mean by
think
that?
I think now you see a movie like, let's say, The Wizard of Oz when it first came out, Judy Garland, there weren't behind the scenes TV shows. There weren't, magazines or the internet where you could see people taking pictures on set, showing how everything was done. You basically, as a viewer, you went out to the movie theater and you saw this and you were just in wonder, like, how did they do that? Well, now any movie being shot, even as they're being shot, you can just go on social media and you can see, oh, there's a green wire there, there's cables here.
Really? Okay.
This is the camera that they are doing it, and then
So you're
you
you're
learn.
you're against exposing what it takes to make a
I
film, at
think
least certain sequences of film of films, I would say, right?
I think to an extent it does ruin the magic of a movie because now
Interesting.
you see actors blowing up on set, yelling and screaming. Then you
Mhm.
see actors out, when they're not making movies, they're out, drug addicted or out in the streets drunk off their
Yeah,
acting like fools.
yeah.
And then it's like, then their name gets dragged through, well, the last movie that he was in, blah, 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 the actor of this movie, blah, blah, blah. And you can just imagine the
I
distribution
see what you're saying.
companies,
Okay.
the directors, the producers are all just like, God, why? Why did you go out, get drunk, and smash your car into a telephone pole, dressed in a pink leotard, coked up, or whatever? All of that outside social media from the movie, all that behind the scenes of people exploding on sets, or even
Hmm.
just showing the locations, showing the props, showing that the guns aren't real or that the facades of buildings are fake. I think it kind of like ruins things because then people become too educated on how movies are being made.
Yes.
And then they can start to see, oh, that's the same building and intersection that they used in this other movie. If you really watch some movies, you can see that, like Kill Bill. You know, that whole scene where they're in the restaurant with the 88 uh,
Yeah, the Crazy
Cougars or
88
whatever.
scene. Yeah.
Yeah, the crazy 88s. That interior has been used in several different movies.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't surprise me if it's the same interior that they used in The Matrix in the scene where he's learning from,
Oh, Kung Fu from Morpheus in
yeah,
the first. Yeah.
yeah.
I can see
It
that. Yeah,
almost
yeah, yeah.
looks the same, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's other movies where the exteriors are they look the same. Some homes are used, you know, in the same different types of movies. And then after a while, you sort of see this, and you know, it's just like seeing the same actors, you know, over and over in all these movies, but they're not actors. They're like it's just Tom Cruise playing Tom Cruise in another Tom Cruise movie. There's no real acting in it. It's just Tom Cruise being Tom Cruise, or it's The Rock. I mean, is he really an actor, or is he just The Rock in every movie?
Right. I see what you're saying.
You know, I think it's sort of like that. And then you see people, they bring in their political issues, their religious
Yeah.
issues,
Yeah.
social media issues, and then suddenly it's no longer a movie just to go see the movie. It's a movie that's going to have political statements attached to it. There's going to be an agenda attached to it. There's going to be pronouns attached to it. There's going to be gender identity issues associated with it. Instead of it just being a movie, it's going to be everything else that is encompassed in the entire internet, you know, that
Yeah, I
comes
see what you're
out.
saying. Well, I think the only thing that I slightly disagree, and I get your point, I really, really do. But and I guess if I was a filmmaker too, there were certain things I would not want to reveal for as far as like the filmmaking process is concerned, just because I want that aura of mystery for people to go, how did you guys do that? And hope that that would be enough to garner their attention. Like, I got to see how they did it. And, you know, and then someone else will say, you got to watch this scene. What they shot was amazing. I don't know how they did it. And it's like, well, I don't care for movies. Well, if you watch this film, you will, or something, you know, something to that extent. I get that. The only thing I'm going to slightly disagree with you is that the magic of filmmaking when you see how it's done. Because here's an example. Like, I'm not sure if you saw the Netflix film Extraction when it came out, what, 2 years ago, whatever it was. Um, for me, it was a great action movie. But there was a scene where you're that whole one shot chase sequence. When they show what it took to make that scene, I was like, holy fuck,
Oh, yeah.
that is awesome. I'm gonna watch that movie again because what I saw, what they've done to make that scene is incredible. I've got to go back to watch it.
That
That's
was
where
when
my
he was strapped on, when he was strapped to the front of the car.
yeah, the director Sam Hargrave. Yeah, it's his name, Sam
Yeah.
Hargrave. That's incredible. Like stories like that, I love because you know there's a lot more involved as far as what when it comes to filmmaking. But when you have a director who's willing to put his neck out there and say, "I want this shot, but I got to be right there so I know how to get the
Yeah.
shot," you know, that's incredible dedication, in my opinion. And given his stunt background and whatnot, you can certainly see where he's infusing all these different areas of expertise into making this film, and it paid off very well. Where they're making a sequel right now,
Yeah.
so in that respect, I think that certainly helps the legend of the film, the legend of of the filmmaking process, where you realize that's what it took. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Sometimes making the film is almost as dangerous as the film looks itself.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's something that where I believe when in having that exposure to educate people when it comes to filmmaking process. Because here's the thing for myself, and I'm not sure how you feel about it too, but I'm in the mindset that I love movies so much. I want people to respect the process of what it takes to film, even if the movie is not good. And there's plenty of films that I don't like out there, but I respect what it took to make the film. Whether I agree with the process or not, I understand it, but I may not just feel so inclined to want to watch it again. But that's what I want the general public to walk away with, knowing that if the movie sucked, but I respect what they've tried to go for. I get it, wasn't for me, but I can see someone else recommending it rather than just saying, you just have this broad stroke of criticism. Movie sucked, don't watch it. That's I think that's disrespectful to the process, in my opinion. That's just how I view
Yeah.
it.
I think
But I
I
mean, I'm
think
not sure how
there's
you feel
more.
about that.
Sure. I think it's like there's like two different. I think that I agree with what you're saying also. That there's two different type of people. There's
Right.
the viewer who just goes to see the movie, and then there's the viewer who might be a filmmaker also.
Right.
So in that aspect, I see where you're coming from. But as a straight on viewer, I mean, it's really about making sure they paid the price of admission to go see that movie
Yeah.
and that they enjoyed it so much that they tell other people to go see it. Now, when a
Yeah.
filmmaker goes to see a movie and they're like, holy shit, that scene was phenomenal. I'm going to Google and see how they did that, look for all the behind the scenes. And then they start telling their friends, look at how they shot this. Then that networking will send another filmmaker to go to the theater and pay for it, to pay for that ticket. So I
Right.
think there's two different types of people when it comes to viewers, those who are in the industry and those who aren't in the industry. And I
Yeah.
think too many people who aren't in the industry know too many secrets about the industry.
I can see that. Yeah, I can see what you mean by that. But but I do agree with you. But I just, here's the thing, because this is the part where I always this is one of the reasons why I do the show, because I'm always interested in talking, and I'm well. Let me slow down here. I'm interested in talking to people who have you know experience in whatever respective field that they're working in, filmmaking, music, comedy, as far as stand up is concerned. There is an art form about making and doing that. And I think a lot of people, like I said before, take that for granted. They just dismiss it if they don't take the time to understand it. Like my wife is one of those
Yeah.
people where I tell her about a movie, say, oh, so I no, I'm sorry, I tell her about stand-up artists. This guy was hilarious. He talked about this, he said these things, but what I love is what he was focusing on. That she's like, oh, okay, like it's a complete disregard to like, but it's the craft of what it took to make the joke. That's what
Yep.
that's what I'm
Sure.
interested in.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people who are like that, and I think this is where I personally feel where the promotional machine is so far behind, because they're I would imagine that some studio execs depend on that ignorance, where they just show the spectacle and then show that it was fantastic, it was a lot of fun, and it says great things about it, and it's going to be amazing, you're going to enjoy it, and that's what they're relying on for the general audience.
Yeah.
I think, as you said before, the audience has kind of gotten wise to that to a point, but there's still a lot of ignorant people out there who just don't know any better, because they just are looking at the broad strokes. Say, well, that sucked, don't watch it.
Yeah.
But then, 5 years down the line, that same person would probably watch it again. So, actually, that was a really good movie. What was I thinking 5 years ago? But you said all this shit
Yeah.
about it that it just, contaminated that thought process. And all of a sudden you have a different perception of whatever had changed along the way. That could, it would vary, obviously. But yeah, I mean, like I've always been very passionate about that. But I mean, I know for yourself though, when you're working at so when you're working on a movie, do you have concerns for yourself as far as, like, in this case, like let's say for a movie you are directing, do you think about, okay, so I shot a film, I we've done a really good job, I'm very proud of the project, and I'm very proud of how it's going to look, how it's turning out so far. But then once you get it released out to the public, are there concerns about, like, but what will people think when the project gets released, for me for to get the reaction? Are they gonna understand my approach to it? Are they gonna understand why I took this approach with the shots and the setup of the characters' motivation and so on and so forth? Like, does that ever cross your mind at all? Or are you just solely focused on, I want to shoot like this, and then you worry about that later?
Yeah. I think that's what it is. I'll
Okay.
worry about it later.
Okay.
Because if I think too much about the end product,
Right.
then I lose focus on what's right in front of me in the moment. And in the moment is really where the story is. It's being in that moment. And as a cinematographer, DP, director, I like to be in that moment. If I take myself out of that moment and think about, well, if I shoot these scenes later, like in a few days, how are those scenes going to mix with this? I mean, I have to think about that to some aspect. But if I think too much about the end product, what it's going to look like up there on the screen, I, I kind of feel I lose focus on what I'm supposed to be doing in the moment. Not to say that it's not in the back of my mind, the bigger picture of things. Um, I think I answered that right.
I think I understand where you're going with this here. Yeah, I guess I'm always kind of nervous to ask that. Well, I wouldn't say nervous, but I'm a little hesitant to ask the question, because I don't want to give the impression that I'm trying to get you to, or anybody who I'm asking this, that you know I'm not trying to trap you in anything. So I was hoping that the question I asked you understood, and then the way that you answered it, I think answered my question. Um, yeah, but so
These are really in-depth these are really good questions. I mean, you're really provoking me to think a lot.
oh,
So
okay.
that's good. I like that a lot.
Well, so well, that's well, I appreciate you saying that because that's what I wanted to hear as well. But that's why I'm kind of going back with what I said before. For me, these type of conversations, for me personally, I think really do help in bringing out an honest moment in a conversation. But the caveat to that for some people is that it's 2 hours long. I don't want to have to listen to all that. Well, that's where you're really going to get your education. I mean, how many conversations can you really think of that last 2 minutes that really was so impactful that you remembered? Very few. But
Very
the
few.
conversations you have with someone that may be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, those are the ones you're going to remember. Now, if you are willing to share that with somebody else who wants to listen to it, that's a whole different ballgame. But
Right.
those are the ones you're going to be carrying with you 95% of the time. The other, 2 minute conversation you may have, maybe because you've known the person for such a long period of time that
Sure.
you have that development already in place. But I think that when I'm trying to highlight some things that people have done before, it's always important for me to showcase of like they're good at this stuff, but what led up to that, and then what have they learned from that, and then are they still as passionate about it? And if they are passionate about it, what has changed along the way? That to me is way more interesting. And I'm not saying the projects aren't interesting, but that is more interesting for me to really delve into the person's psyche to understand where they're coming from, to see how the evolution of the filmmaking process for them was for them. And if you can learn about them in that regard, imagine if
Yeah.
someone else really took the time to listen to that, they'll walk away. That was really interesting. I'm going to check out this movie now. That's what I really
Yeah.
hope will happen. Like, I really do mean that. Every single time I have a guest on the show, I always say that, but I really do mean that because for me, I found something that was interesting for me to converse with you about, that I want to learn about, that I think is important to highlight. But to get to know you, I think is another added um, element for me to want to bring out something that I'm not aware of about you, that I think should highlight what are personal traits that maybe people will connect with, that may not consider watching The Texas Witch, but now they've heard you talk, I want to check it out when it comes out. That's what I hope will happen. Like, I really do mean that. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I don't mean to go off on a tangent with that
No,
there,
no,
but
no. And I mean, I think that personal connection when it comes to like interviews like this is like you can basically and we've touched on this, and I'm pretty sure we're both going to agree that you can find any filmmaker, director, look up
mm,
the interviews that they've done with a dozen different people, and they're almost going to all be the same.
right.
But then you get into every now and then they get into these personal conversations about, um, how things really are on a
Yeah.
set. And for me, people are the same no matter where you go.
Right.
That group of people making films over there is going to be the same as a group of people over here making films. Um, People are almost basically the same wherever you go. The process of making a movie is universally the same. The platforms and outlets for it are going to change here and there, maybe a little bit different, but it's basically going to be the same. The best part of making any movie isn't just the end result as a team effort. It's actually everything that goes on set with
Yeah.
people that you are completely compatible with. And it's just the most liberating freedom to know you're on a set with a great group of people and the script is good. You already know the script is good because it's getting produced. I mean, if
Hmm.
I, well, okay, hold on.
I was about to say, hold on, let's
Wait a
take a step
minute.
back.
Yeah, hold on. Let me backpedal a little bit. Okay, just because it's getting produced doesn't mean it's
Right.
good.
Yeah.
But if you have a great team, a great crew, you're going to make the best experience out of it. And even though it might not be the best script, it'll turn out to be a really good movie, regardless, whether it looks good, sounds good, or it just puts off a great vibe and people watch it. So for me, the wanting to do these movies is a challenge every single time. The crew from Circus of the Dead is not the same as the crew from Room 203. It's not the same as 90 Feet from Home. It's not the same as Meteor. It's not the same as the Texas Witch. Every one of those experiences is so different and so unique. that hearing the personal stories, the trials and tribulations, the drama, all the skin curdling stories that happened specifically to that set, it to me makes me want to go see independent movies. You
Yeah.
know, I have a lot of friends that make movies and they'll be like, hey, we're showing this movie, blah, blah, blah. You want to come see it? And I'll be like, no,
Mm.
no, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not anything like that. It's just, I know that they had a good time making it,
Yeah.
but sometimes they had too good of a time making it, and it
Mm.
shows. And I think there's that fine line of having a good time while you're on set and actually working and making a great movie, enjoying the time you're making.
Yeah.
There's a difference. And I think some people will see a lot of these behind the scenes of movies being made, and now with independent films that are just splattered all over social media. Before, you wouldn't show anything behind the scenes until after the movie was released.
Hmm.
Now you're showing behind the scenes before the movie's even done being written, or before it's even being cast, or before the
Yeah.
cameras even roll. You're seeing all kinds of behind the stuff. And I think a lot of people put too much of that reality television personality into making movies, because now
Yeah.
they're coming to set with this sort of preconceived notion. I've got my own camera crew following me, even though it's my own cell phone, and it's TikTok or it's just Instagram or Facebook. It's my own production, and I'm going to treat myself, like I'm the star of this movie. And
Yeah.
I've had producers, that I've worked with before that are working on projects as PAs, and they sat out in an empty parking lot at a stadium for 12 hours and guarded an empty parking lot for 12 hours. But they post a picture and they're like, cameras rolling, producer, got more things coming down the line, and then they throw up an IMDb saying that they're on some big major show. I mean, you were a production assistant guarding an empty parking lot outside of a stadium. You were nowhere near any of that stuff. So there's a reason, there's a time to keep your mouth closed and fake it until you make it. And then there are people who are just faking it straight out, boldly faking it,
Yeah.
and hope that they're going to make it. It's like, you pick a side. What are you going to do?
Yeah, it's that perception. I think that
Yeah,
we're
that's the
that's what I'm saying
perception.
because like well, here's the thing for because I understand what you're going with social media here, but that's the thing about social media too is that you can kind of tell where the facade is, and you can also tell where the reality is too. When because a lot of times you may be some people don't realize that they're recording themselves and they have this perception about them, and then someone's behind this, it was behind them is recording how it actually looks, and you're like, wait a minute, that is nowhere near as glorious as you made it seem. Like, hold on,
Yeah,
well, what did
yeah.
so you can be exposed within seconds. But again, like that's the process of filmmaking, I think for me is important to share with other people that it's not easy and it's not really all that exciting because I've never been on a film set, but I've the very little that I have done, which I've done very few of short things I've done for the channel, it's extremely slow and it's extremely daunting at times too, especially if you have a time crunch where you have to get something done and you have other people need to cooperate with you that don't want to cooperate with you, but they're just doing it because, all right, well, you're, I just want to help you, but I got to get out in 3 hours. So you have like a time constraint that's in place. So you have to work quickly, and it's very, very, it can be very stressful too. But we've already talked about that before. But so for you, here's what I'm curious about yourself when it comes to the the business aspect for yourself when it comes to filmmaking. Has that were you already privy to that stuff ahead of while you're doing news, working on the news sets, for NBC, I think you said CBS as well too.
Yeah.
Kind of privy to all that stuff, and then working on films, independent films, some more high profile projects. Were you aware of how the filmmaking process works and it's how distribution works and what the realities are when it comes to having the film be sold and then for it to be released and the amount of work that's involved with that as well too? Were you kind of aware of that ahead of time or did you learn that as you go along the way?
I learned it as I went along. I
Okay.
mean, had I gone to film school, I would have had a better insight of how, that all that red tape works. Working in news, I mean, it was a 9 to 5 job. Well, it wasn't a 9 to 5 job. It was almost a 24-hour a day job. But my role was basically I show up, I grab a camera, I grab my truck, I grab some media, and I go out and I shoot. The business aspect of selling commercial spots, things like that, I was not privy to. They had accounting departments and business people who agents who did all of that stuff. When I transitioned over to the movies, the short films, the budgets weren't very big, and there was always a producer that handled that stuff, the finances. The movies that I shot and edited, once they were done, I turned that finished project over, and it went to film festivals, things like that. So there wasn't any business, monetary kind of like business associated with that type of distribution. When I finally got into some feature films, all of that was handled by somebody else, and I was not made privy to any of that. Even now, as a director, I still am not privy to distribution and how it works. I hear stories from Brett on how it works. I hear stories from John how it works. I hear stories from Billy Pond how it works. I hear stories from all the other directors that I've worked for. I'll ask them questions, and then I get the basic answer. Well, you gotta, find an agent, find a distributor. You gotta make all these calls, and it's like you never really get a solid answer. You never get
Yeah.
a solid answer on, well, what does that mean? What does that entail? Who did you call? What's the telephone number? All the details you want to know
What
about a
what's the
distribution deal.
hotline?
Yeah, what's the hotline? Is
Yeah.
there a distribution deals for dummies 101? Is there a
Yeah.
book I can go read? And every video that I've ever watched a producer say, well, I went out and I got my own distribution deal on my first feature, and that's why I'm famous. And it's like, well, how did you do that? Well, I made a
Yeah.
couple of calls, and then it's like, okay, you didn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
You just said you made a couple of calls. That doesn't, what did the paperwork look like?
Yeah.
You know, then I find out that this guy had in his distribution deal, he had to like dub the movie into like 120 different languages,
Yeah.
and it had to be subtitled. All the audio tracks have to be separated. All the music tracks have to be separated from the sound effects tracks because when they dub it over into another language, you gotta, and so that aspect I've not had to deal with. I'm starting to deal with it now. And as I'm, finished editing the Texas Witch, I'm looking at my timeline and it's a mess.
Mm.
To me it makes sense, but to to a distributor or to somebody else who might have to pick up the editing later, visual effects, it's a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah.
So now I have to go back and clean my timeline up and then talk to a few people. Well, when you did this, how did you do it? And then, basically the answers are real simple. It just seems like there's a lot more to it than there really is. That's where I think that you always think that Hollywood is this great big magical machine.
Yeah.
It's not. It's just a, couple of men and women. They go out with a camera and, they rehearse these scripts and choreography, some action, blah, blah, blah. They smash it all together. And then it's a movie.
Yeah.
That to me, that's the biggest part that I understand. Now, taking that movie and trying to find a distributor, working out the red tape, international sales, DVD sales, now all the streaming platform
Yeah.
deals, all the legalities. You got to have lawyers, you got to have an
Mm.
agent, you got to have all this stuff. And it's like, it to me is like super scary. It's super scary.
Yeah.
But for the directors that I've worked with before, I know I have a lot of support behind me to help back me up if something were to go wrong. And I've like with Texas Witch, I had a distributor message me and they were like, oh, throwing me all these pitch lines and shit like that. And well,
Yeah.
they didn't just send that email to me,
Yeah.
but they
Yeah.
sent it to the executive producers.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to John. I'm talking to John about distribution and how it works. And I was
Right.
like, well, I had some distributor message me and he goes, who was it? And I told him who it was. And it was a distributor that he once messed with or dealt with, and
Yeah.
they nearly ruined his career.
Yeah.
Nearly ruined his career. They couldn't recuperate even like $90,000 of the budget. They couldn't. It was like, how do you not recuperate that? The movie's fantastic. It should be no problem making that much money back.
Right.
And so I tell him, this guy called me and, was sending me all this stuff. And he's like, that's the guy who almost ruined my life. So then the executive producers of Texas Witch, Jana and Andrew, they messaged me and they were saying, oh, this guy from this distributor company messaged me. And I was like, don't send him anything. Don't send him anything. That's the guy that almost ruined the last feature film I was on. And I was like, they could not recuperate any money. And for you as an executive producer, foremost, you want to recuperate the money you spent,
Mhm.
if not at least make twice to three times as much on the sale because you want to make movie on it. You don't want to break just even.
Right.
You want to sell it. And then you want to, everyone hopes of getting a theatrical release,
Right.
which is that's not going to happen most of the time. 90% of the time, you're not going to get a theatrical release.
Right.
And then you want to keep your international sales. You want to keep those rights because you could sell to like a market in Japan and make $200,000 like that. Then you sell it to some other market in the Middle East, you got another $150,000. So there are little stories and little things like that I understand that come from casual conversations with Brett and John and Billy and some other people who tried to do self distribution. I talked about distribution with Eric Gibson, who I did Devil's Acid with, and Incantation. I've done a couple of movies with him. So I kind of like watch them go through the experience
Yeah.
and then learn from them. And so early on in my career, one of the best things that I ever heard as advice is as to stand on the shoulders of geniuses in
Right.
order to be successful. And I try to work with those people as much as possible. They're smart in some way. They really are. Every one of them has something that they're so good at understanding that if I could get all of them together in one room, I could probably sell the Texas Witch for $1 million. But how hard it would to get all those people in there, form a strategy, and then hit a distribution company up and make your offer so rock solid that they'll be like, and confident in your end product that they'll
Right.
be like, sure, $1 million check, there you go.
Yeah.
See you when the next movie comes out. For a lot of independent filmmakers, it's trial and error. You have to do it by yourself, and most of the time, they're going to get burned.
Yeah.
They really will get burned. So
Yeah.
for me,
It's yeah. It's a very. I think that's the wake up call for a lot of people who want to be filmmakers. And I've said it before with Brett and a bunch of other people is that they always. I think the stupidest question to ask is, how can I make it in the business? That's not a real question. I think to ask anymore at all. I think really, because there's I think the misconception for a lot of filmmakers or that people who want to become filmmakers that they have this vision and they have this perception about Hollywood and I can make they for Robert Rodriguez who got lucky with El Mariachi when he came out in '92. He had the film festival going on and got picked up and made a sequel. Then you have Kevin Smith who had his film, which took a while to get momentum for him, but eventually he did get that momentum going for him. And then Quentin Tarantino kind of more along fell in the same category too. So you have these three directors. Oh, and even what's his name, Richard Linklater, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken. They all those four guys for every Richard Linklater, Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, and Kevin Smith, there are hundreds of thousands of other directors and writers who are in that same boat as they were and that never got picked up or that did get picked up, but nothing ever happened to their film that you
right,
will never hear of.
right. And
And
so early on in my career, I was on Netflix when you had to get the three DVDs in the mail,
mm-hmm,
watch your three DVDs, and then you send them back. And you
right,
actually had a catalog of movies from around the world that you could choose from. So during that time period, I was watching a lot of international movies and I got to see a lot of work, that didn't come out of Hollywood. And I kind of started to realize that it's it's a lot of propaganda and a lot of media control about what happens here, what
right,
you see here in the US.
yeah,
So when it comes to feature films and in the theaters here in the US, of course Hollywood is going to promote and market only their movies. But it wasn't until social media and the internet that you started to hear about Robert Rodriguez, early Quentin Tarantino, Richard Linklater. it was social media and early internet that promoted these people because then all these other independent filmmakers and other people were saying, "Hey, have you seen this movie?" And then they'll send a link to it, and it's like, "Oh wow, this looks interesting. Why doesn't Hollywood put out this? Why isn't Hollywood showing this movie?" And it's because Hollywood hasn't invested in them, and they're not
Yeah.
going to invest in them until they produce a couple of $1 million features for them.
Yeah.
Then Hollywood starts talking about your Robert Rodriguez's and your Richard Linkletters and your Quentin Tarantino's. Um, to me, I still think Robert Rodriguez gets a bad rap as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I do too.
I think I mean, the guy started his own TV channel. Holy
Yeah, El
shit.
Rey
And he's like,
production, or
and
was it
to
El Rey
me,
channel? Yeah.
he's like a beta tester for James Cameron and Avatar's technology.
Yeah.
Uh, I think that whole Alita,
Alita
Alita
Battle. That was a good movie. I like that
it,
one.
I had reservations about it. I thought it was pretty good for what
Yeah.
it was. To
Yeah.
me, it was like, here's James Cameron saying, I've got some new technology that I want to try out. Here, I'm going to help you fund this movie and make this movie you've always wanted to do, but use my technology. See how it works out because this is what I'm going to use for Avatar 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever.
Right, right.
So to me, that relationship between the two of them, I think is gold. I
Yeah.
think it goes to show that the biggest Hollywood director right now
Hmm.
looks at one of the biggest independent directors for testing, for assistance, for help, for an outlet to try what he wants to do with his movies.
Yeah.
I think Robert Rodriguez is probably one of the more rounded filmmakers out there because his vision is so big. It's not just the movies, but it was the fucking channel.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I thought that was so ambitious and it was so ahead of its time. You know, hearing a filmmaker wanting to make his own channel so he could show his own movies that he liked, and you know, for people that are like him.
Yeah.
But I think it was bigger than that. I
Yeah.
think it, and I hope it comes back. And I've been reading that it might come back with all the platforms and channels that are out there now.
Yeah.
Um, I think he deserves a lot more credit than he gets as a director.
I agree with you too. I mean, I think for me, a good chunk of his films for me don't really sit that well with me. Not because I think they're terrible, more just it wasn't my cup of tea,
Sure.
especially when it came to the kid films. But I agree with you 100% when it comes to him making his movie. He had, I would imagine, have 100% control with what he wanted to do. So if the film turned out a certain way, well, it's all on him. And
Yeah.
some were very successful, and some were not. But the ones that were successful obviously had, excuse me, had left an impact for people to remember him for what he has done. And then when he came out and had done Alita Battle Angel, I remember the first thing I thought when they had announced that he's going to be, I believe he co-wrote the film too, because they had to change a lot of stuff because of Cameron had wrote the film like 50, I'm not sorry, 20 years ago, whatever it was. And when Rodriguez was assigned to help co-write it and also direct the film, that was the time I thought, okay, this is the movie that I know for a fact that he is really going to truly showcase what he's very capable of, not just in terms of storytelling, because I think he's a great storyteller. Films, it varies, but as far as storytelling is concerned, the action and the amount of knowledge he has with special effects, cinematography, the whole bit, he's going to do phenomenal. Visually, the movie looks beautiful. I like the film. Was it the greatest thing I've ever seen? No, but I did enjoy the film a great
Yeah.
deal. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I really did like the movie. And as far as the sequel is concerned, we'll see how that happens. But the fact is that he basically got to do what I felt like he should have been able to do, after he had done Desperado. Like he really should have been taking on these big tentpole projects, which I'm sure he was trying to do for a number of years. But one thing led to another, never worked out. So, but again, like you have a guy who has taken destiny and his control of his own destiny here, and he's kind of like under the radar. But then when he comes out, everyone remembers, oh yeah, that's the guy who done this movie. I love that film, and now we're going to see him do something to a much larger scale. Those are the type of stories I love to hear when it comes to a director taking on something that can really truly showcase their skill. The only caveat now is that the film wasn't as successful as they anticipated, so therefore he's right back to square one again, I would imagine. So, but he did release a Netflix film not too long ago, which is I think the sequel to Lava Girl and Shark Boy or something like that.
Yeah.
which I didn't see. I heard mixed things about it, but I was intrigued enough to want to check it out. But then when I heard the reviews, I was like, I'm gonna wait till I feel prepared to watch it.
Sure.
But
And
anyways,
uh, and in defense of some of those bad kid movies that he
yeah,
made, he banked a lot of money.
he did.
God damn, did he bank a lot of money on those movies?
Yeah, he did. But I mean, that's the thing. Like he was smart and understood what's going to work for him and what's not going to
Yeah,
work, and he took a chance and made an investment, and it paid off. And a lot of people remembered those movies. The Spy Kids film is this franchise that I think no one thought was going to take off, and it did. I remember when I saw Spy Kid 3D because he did 3D at that time when it was like
yeah,
it was kind of like the beginning stages of what it was now. Um, I appreciated what he did, and it was a chance that he took on that didn't sit well with me personally, but I loved what he was going for, and as a result of his ambition, I became more of a fan of him, but not so much the film. But that's the thing I'm saying. Like I respect the filmmaker and the filmmaking process, and that's why
right.
I'm a fan of him. Not necessarily the film so much, but I'm a fan of what he's been able to pull off and what he's been able to show off as well too. And that's what I'm hoping people will be getting off of that as well. But here's what I wanted to just kind of close off here with you.
Sure.
I, I was aware with who you were once I became aware of Brett and conversing with him and seeing who he's worked with. And as I said before, I look at who he's worked with, and there's a consistency as far as what we talked about before of who he's worked with, and there's a good reason for that. And I can see why in conversing with you why you guys get along because you are like Brett himself. You guys are very upfront. You guys have a certain work ethic that obviously clicks very well, and you guys like to get the job done, no bullshitting around, just keep things moving forward. And in hearing you share your stories about what it is you've gone through and giving your perspective on certain things and how you perceive it and how you've evolved from it, that's something that I think is very important for me to highlight here because I wanted to really get a feel for who you were, not only as a filmmaker, as a DOP, but rather as a person as well too. And I feel like that from what I've had this conversation here with you, that I've learned a lot about you, but also learned a lot about the filmmaking process itself from your perspective that I wasn't necessarily privy to or probably didn't put so much thought into. But hearing it from your angle, it gives me a whole new set of lenses for me to look at certain things differently now, considering what we've just discussed here. So, if anything, I want to thank you for that, but also for you thinking and giving me the time out of your day to converse with me about this here. Um, and I don't know if there's anything else you want to say in closing as far as what we kind of touch upon here, or anything else you want to point out before we sign off here.
No, I just thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad that you took notice of Brett's movies, and that you enjoyed them to the extent that you do. And like you said, it is once you find it. I took those words of other directors that I heard as a kid saying that once you find a team, stick with it. I mean, that's that team that's going to help you win, no matter if it's a movies, no matter if it's Olympics, gymnastics, it's a football team, baseball team, it's a team. Your end product is different. You're not batting home runs, you're not kicking field goals, touchdowns, or
Right.
making baskets or anything like that. You're banking box office seats. That's your that's your ultimate goal. Of course, you want to create something beautiful. Everybody says they want to create art. Well, yeah, create that art, but you want to sell that art.
Yeah.
You want to make, you want to get a commission off of that art. You
Right.
know, you just don't want to hang it on the wall and let everybody watch it for free. I mean, if you can afford to do that, go for it. And there aren't very many people that are like that,
No.
that can afford to make a movie just to show to their friends. Although I've had one director that was like that. He wrote a script 55 years ago, worked his whole life to try to make it as one feature film so he could be credited as a director because he had his best friends tell him, "You're never going to be a director." And it stuck with him for 50 years. And then he saw a movie that I shot, Devil's Deal, a Western I shot out in East Texas. He saw it, he loved it. He hit me up. He told me that story, and that was the only reason why I took the gig.
Yeah.
I think with anybody, male or female, child or adult, you can be anything that you want to be as long as it's good in your heart and you're willing to put in the man hours or the hours. not man hours, woman hours, child hour, whatever. You want to put in the hours and work to get it done. Then by all means do it. But don't ever let somebody tell you you can't be a filmmaker. You can't be a cinematographer. You can't be a director. You can't be an actor. You can't be any of these things. 40-50% of the stuff I did early on in my life, I took those jobs because people told them they couldn't do it. And I was like, that's such a lie. And here's how I'll prove it. We're going to win Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, and we're going to make this short film the fucking bomb. And so it's like the mentality. It really is. Filmmaking is a mentality. People say, oh, they're people who go into the film industry have to be crazy. Or, not at all, bro. You have to be so sane to make it in this business. You have to be sane on the edge of insanity.
Mm.
People who are insanity in this business don't last long, and you end up seeing them in the news for the wrong reason.
Yep.
So, I mean, making movies is it's a thing, something that comes straight from your heart. Either you got it or you don't. But if you don't, it doesn't mean you can't. And just because you do have it doesn't mean you should. So many cliches and back talk here.
But it's true though.
It
That's
is.
where these things come from. They really do have a good reason for that. But yeah, I agree with you 100% with what you just said right there though. And you know, as I said before, I really truly did enjoy our conversations, and I think
Yeah,
this is something that I hope what would happen with you is that, considering that this is actually your first interview of this sort that we
yeah,
are having here, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I hope someone one day will come across this, and then years down the line, they'll look back and say, came across your first interview. This is what you said back then. And I'm hoping that you're in a good spot at that time, and they'll bring it up to you. And I hope you have genuine, good memories off of this conversation as well. But even if you're at a point in your life where you may be struggling in some capacity, that conversation will hopefully reignite something where, like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do what I wanted to do right now. And I
yeah.
hope that will have that sort of impact on you, because it's a long-term goal, but you know, yeah, it's a good one to make, I think. And I hope this will be beneficial for you in the future when it comes to someone looking into this and finding this and sharing that with you in the
Well, thank you very much. This is awesome. I couldn't have asked for a better first time interview that wasn't on a red carpet. Because those are always hogged up by the director.
yeah.
So it's like I get one or two questions, and I'm always bitter about, not being interviewed or something like that when it comes to the movies.
Well, we got a
So,
3 hour interview out of this here, so you got plenty of
yeah, so
fuel
thank you.
here.
It
So
was very